Welcome to Season 7 of True Blue Conversations with your host, Adam Bloom. Real talk with those who pledge to keep us safe with grit, sacrifice and determination. Let's get on with the show. This episode of True Blue Conversations is proudly brought to you by Loudon Private Wealth, the team trusted by professionals, veterans and families across Australia to build real long-term financial security. If you want to take control of your finances, protect your future and build real generational wealth, Loudon Private Wealth are the people you want in your corner. They don't do gimmicks, they don't do hype, just smart strategy and honest advice, coupled with real-world experience. Check out the links in the description to contact Warren and the team via loudonpw.com.au or 02 8313 0418. Now let's get back to the show. This episode of True Blue Conversations was brought to you by Dead Reckoning Rum, creating individual rum releases commemorating the diggers lost in Afghanistan, proudly supporting veterans, donating 50% of all their profits to veterans organisations around Australia. Look up Dead Reckoning Rum, buy some bottles, connect via Instagram and Facebook and give them your support. Now, let's get back to the show.
G'day, welcome back to True Blue. Today I'm coming to you live from Brisbane and I've got a special guest on, and this man had a very, very distinguished career in the Australian Army and has gone on to study and is now a doctor, so we'll definitely talk about that. And he spent early days in 3RAR and then went over to the West and went down the SF path and joined the SAS and had a very long and distinguished career in the SAS and deployed on multiple deployments overseas. And it's an absolute honour and a privilege to have him on. So, Dr. Dan Cooper, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be on.
Mate, it's been a long time. We've been teeing this up for a while now, and it's actually good to get you on. And, mate, before we get into your career in the Army, and obviously, you know, I mentioned at the start, Special Forces, let's go back to a young Dan. Talk me through you as a young fella growing up.
Yeah, so I grew up Western Sydney, so the Lower Blue Mountains outside of Sydney.
Yeah, my hometown, mate.
Yeah, okay, so around sort of Hawkesbury Valley region.
Yep.
A couple different areas around there, but sort of semi-rural acreage property. My old man was a bricklayer the whole time I was growing up. Mum was a stay-at-home mum. She worked a little bit before kids, but then stayed at home. I sort of look at it as just kind of a very vanilla, average Australian childhood. So, you know, Dad went and worked 5 days a week. As a bricklayer, he used to work a lot of weekends as well. So I didn't see a lot of him growing up just because of the hours and working away all the time on new estates and those sort of things. Mum did all the work around the house, kind of raising us, getting us ready for school. Went to a pretty small primary school. I think there was about 80 kids there. Then from there, a very average high school. So nothing really significant in there, kind of just your average run-of-the-mill sort of
typical Aussie family.
Yeah, you know, used to go out exploring the bush. Used to do not many big family holidays back then. Sort of do, you know, one holiday once a year, which was more state-based. I never really left the state when I was younger. Sort of had a little bit of friction at school, like a lot of blokes that I know. You know, a little bit of trouble here and there. I think I got suspended from school in my sort of high school years for a little bit. Got kicked, or sort of kicked out's probably not the term, but I wasn't allowed in the classroom for maths for a while. And randomly I ended up doing better in that subject, being out of the room than in it. Sort of thing. But yeah, kind of, I don't know, pretty ordinary sort of childhood, I suppose.
Were you a scholar, or were you academically gifted, or not really?
Oh, not really. Like a lot of people that I know, the school system, probably that structure of it, I struggled with a little bit. So I was very middle of the road, C's, those sort of things. I did a little bit of self-paced learning when I wasn't allowed in the classroom because of, you know, shit behaviour. And I sort of dragged myself up into the B's, kind of learning at my own speed. But I think it was more disengaged from the process. I was a lot more into outdoors, sport, being competitive, those sort of things, than I was in the classroom. So sort of trudged my way through there. Went to year 12 basically because I didn't want to get a job. At that age, I just didn't bother going out into the workforce. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do with myself. I was kind of kicking a can down the road for those last kind of senior years. And then when I left, I went and got a trade. I kicked around in 2 sort of temporary jobs and then got a trade. I had no ambition to go to university. And to be honest, I think if I went and studied at that point in time, I just would have been wasting both my time and the money for the course. I just wasn't in a position where I could sit myself down for another 3 to 4 years just going through that study process. So I needed to be out, I think, being busy with my hands and focus on something else.
Do you reckon, looking back now, if you know your teachers, could they foresee you as being Dr. Dan Cooper back then? Or
I think, so I've got young kids now, they're getting sort of into that high school years, so I've been watching their interactions with teachers, and I can see some similarities. They're both better at school than I was, hands down. But I think there were some teachers who could kind of talked about the potential, whether they could see it or whether they just talked to you about the potential you have, because they know you're just wasting your time and probably a lot of theirs. So they sort of talk to you, and even in some of your interviews, I'll talk to your parents, that there's more potential there, he's just not working hard enough, which is another way of saying engaged. Yeah. And then there's teachers where I just didn't get along with. You just... And it happens, you don't get along with everyone. But that teacher-student relationship and interaction is really important. So some I'll kind of responded to, others I just didn't respond to, and you just don't want to be in that class, so that impacts your learning. And they probably don't want you in there, to be honest, because you're impacting the class. Yeah. So, I don't know, but I know when I was leaving, the high school careers counsellor that we had called me into his office on one of the last days, and I don't know how many kids he called in there, and pretty much said that there was a job going at the local warehouse sweeping floors, and he thought I was a good fit to work in a warehouse for the rest of my life, essentially, and that I should apply for it. And I kind of looked at him and walked out, and I ended up applying for the job, randomly enough. But clearly that's what he thought my potential was. So I think a lot of them would be surprised if they looked now at what I've done compared to who I was at that point in time.
But I think too, like, that's a lot of us, mate. Like I had the same thing. You'll amount to nothing. You'll do nothing in life, and then we all seem to find our way, don't we? Like you go and get a bit of life experience, and then you actually go, I might actually give life a bit of a crack now, and actually,
I wouldn't say all of us find our way. I think I got a lot of friends at school who kind of didn't find their way and went down different paths. Yeah, and I know a lot of the guys that I worked with later on in life. A lot of them hit that crossroads sort of point, to steal a term. But it's kind of, I guess it's just the interactions, those peer groups as to which path you ultimately take. So I know I could have gone either way at certain points where I could have become antisocial, I could have become destructive, really bad behaviours, and just kind of been one of those people that I look at now and think, how did they get to that point? Or I could have gone down the path I went down, or even a whole heap of other opportunities. And there was opportunities when I look back that were presented to me, and just for some reason or other I didn't take, which would have put me on a completely different trajectory, good, bad, indifferent. Yeah. But the path I went down ultimately was probably a pretty decent one, so I've got no real regrets there. But I think there's a lot of guys that I worked with, and I see it now a lot in the community looking at young men, is that we're just not keeping them engaged with society, with school, with the community as much as what we probably could be. So we're losing a lot of them to antisocial behaviour, to online groups, and there's a whole heap of different groups on there that are constantly targeting children and just recruiting them into their kind of social sort of things, or their cults or ideology.
Their thinking, or
whatever you want to call it, into their little gangs. Yeah. Or they're just off, doing their own shit for TikTok and all this sort of stuff. They're not really healthy, contributing members of society, in which I think a lot of them probably, when they were little, had dreams of being one of those roles, but at some point they've just left and become disengaged. So, I think a lot of the guys I know were at those points, and I definitely was. So, I wouldn't say all, but there's definitely a lot of at-risk kids kicking around who, without the right mentors or the right people interacting with them, are probably a higher risk or high probability of going down those bad paths. Yeah, alternate paths.
Definitely. And were you sporty? And do you have any brothers and sisters?
Yeah, so I was right into rugby league, and where I grew up, it was rugby league territory. Yeah. So it's the catchment area for the Penrith Panthers. Unfortunately, there's so many talented kids out there that you have to be a real standout to play there. And my talent was nowhere near as much as my ambition, or I liked the idea of playing rugby league,
Yeah.
but when I was younger, I didn't like the idea of the work it took, essentially. And I just didn't realise how serious you needed to be at it at that stage. And I was kind of just playing around with it, but I just enjoyed playing the game. I had a younger sister who was 2 years younger than me, and then an older brother that was 4 years. So when I was growing up, a lot of backyard sport. It was heavy one-sided losses on my side. So, I used to lose pretty much every sport we played in the backyard. But I guess that kind of brings you up a little bit around, constantly trying to find a way to win. Because occasionally when you get those little wins, you feel really good about it, but they were pretty rare.
Yeah, right. And so did you have any family members that had served in the military before you, or were you the first?
Nah, my grandfather was in the Air Force in World War II. I'm not too sure the details of his service, but he was mostly domestically or within Australia. I think he went out a couple of times. From what I can understand, he was quite handy with his fists, so he ended up involved in their boxing. And I think it was the later stages of the war, so he never really seen any sort of combat deployment or anything like that. I did know my great-grandmother growing up, and she spoke about her brothers being in the First World War sort of thing, but I think there was a lot of people at that stage. It wasn't so voluntary as what it probably is now. But they're about the only two up until my brother joined about 2 or 3 years ahead of me, and then I joined after him. I'd had a bit of an interest, but then him coming back talking about how much fun he was having, the enjoyment of it, the excitement, that sort of thing, it kind of concreted the idea for me. So I was like, all right, sweet, I'm going to give this a go for a couple of years and have a bit of fun, and then I'll see what life throws at me after that.
So you join up in 1997, mate, and talk me through the process back then, because the internet doesn't exist back then, and not like it does in 2025. Kids today don't know they're alive, mate. I do, because I remember what it was like, the old dial-up and all that. But do you walk into the recruiting office and go, hey, I want to join up, or talk me through that process? Yeah,
so when I did it then, it was basically I just went into the recruiting office. It wasn't a local one. You're sort of halfway to the city to get to one. You walk in, start talking to the guy that was there, and I think he was an artillery dude that was the recruiter at the time. So it's a sales pitch. So they give you the sales pitch. You watch the video, which at that stage was a pretty cool video, heaps of action, that sort of thing. But even the ads on TV were more action-focused. It wasn't, your army or any of this other stuff. It was kind of, this is what we do. If you want to do it, come along. And to me, it was like, sweet, I'll be in on that. So watch the videos and you tell them your interest, and then it's like an initial application, I think, and then you start through the process. And even back then, it was around a year long.
Yeah,
so I know people complain about the length of the process, but it was still 6 to 12 months from memory. So, you go through, you put your application in, and then you start the screening process. So there's a number of screens. There's the psychological, there's the fitness. You go into a battery test there. Like, there's just different time points before you go through. So I don't remember the exact time period, but at some point, you keep passing and getting through your gates, and then you turn up. Like, you invite, so this is your intake, you turn up, make your oath to the Queen at the time or to God, and then get on the bus and off you go with your 2 suitcases and pretty much an open mind.
Yeah, right. So you head down to Mate Kapuka, and what was... Because how old are you when you joined up?
So I was 20, so I turned 21 at Kapuka.
So you'd seen a bit of like, you're not like a 17-year-old that you go, it's not like it's in your face, but it's not shock and awe in your face. Like, you've had a bit of life experience, and you get to Kapuka, and it's very different now. I've heard Kapuka today is very different to when you went through. So political correctness didn't exist. What do you remember of your time at Kapuka?
So when you go down there, it's a game. And my brother had been through there a couple of years before, so I'd had a little bit of information from him. And I had a mate that went through the Ready Reserve system back when they were running it, and he told me a little bit about the experience. So, it's a game. You're going to get beasted here and there. You just do what you need to do, pass all your assessments, and off you go. So I was still pretty young, still sort of highly suggestible, but I'd finished my apprenticeship at that point in time. So, went down there. I remember the usual shit that people would sort of talk about from that point, and it was still a lot softer, or they'd taken away a lot of the bastardisation that had been a few years before. So it's always been an evolutionary process. It's just finding that sweet spot of putting people under the right amount of pressure and instilling the characteristics that are effective for their role or going to be effective for their career, and not bastardising, because no one learns from being bastardised. It was probably still a bit barbaric when I went through, so there was still a few things that could be removed, but I found it amusing for the most part. I remember getting screamed at in the hallway one day because one of the buttons on my pocket I'd missed when we were getting changed for the 4th time, and I'd picked up a uniform off the floor, because every time you get changed, it's not the right uniform, and then you go back in, and it's just games. You play games, and I'm pretty sure that time's allocated for that stuff. And then everyone gets screamed at, and then it comes your turn. Then they just come along, and they inspect everything, and I'd pick the uniform up off the floor anyway, where I dumped it probably 2 changes earlier. And I knew I was going to get screamed at, because I just hadn't been screamed at yet, and he's just in my face about this button, and literally how I'd killed the whole platoon, and the usual stuff, and chased me into the room to do the button up, and then... it was that sort of stuff, and then it's mixed in with the educational lessons, the weapons training, drill training, a little bit of bush, that sort of thing. So it wasn't a bad period. It's very regimented, obviously, being indoctrinated, all those sort of things. You could argue how effective some of it was. I didn't mind it, to be honest. I sort of got through it. I got my allocation of infantry, which is what I wanted, and then off I went. So I did my 3 months there, which I think they did 6-week course. Came through not long after they started the 6-week program, but I think they went back to the 3-month. After that, I'm not too sure on the details, but I know it just wasn't enough to train them. So did that and went off to Singo.
So Singo, mate, I've heard from every infantryman that goes through it. That's because you mixed in with all your other corps when you go to Kapuka. Yeah. This is now you're with infantry guys. You're doing infantry tactic. You're learning. What was that like?
Yeah, it's a boys' camp. So you're there with 30 guys, most of them you get along with, you all got very similar interests. At that point, when I went through, most of the guys were very similar age. It's probably like 5 years in between the youngest to the oldest type of thing. You're just doing really cool stuff during the week. It's a little bit more relaxed, and it's just you're going through your initial employment training, so you're just learning everything you need to do to be an infantryman. So you're doing all the cool stuff during the week, and then you're allowed out on the weekends. Like, you've got a little bit more freedom. And like most people... we stuffed up our freedoms so they'd get taken away off you. And then at some point, they just got nothing left to take, so they just, go, do whatever you want. So I think we got in a fight in town. No, actually Newcastle, I think. We got in a fight in Newcastle, and everything gets back because everyone knows who you are. Because everyone goes to the same place, and someone will recognise where you're from, and that gets back. So word got back that we were fighting, and then we're only allowed into the local area the next weekend, so we got into a fight there. I think it was with another platoon that had been fighting in Singleton. So then they decided that they would restrict both platoons to the base. I don't know where that makes sense. Yeah. But you've got two platoons that have already had a fight, and now you're not letting them go anywhere, but you're letting them have heaps of alcohol, and cheaper alcohol on the weekend. So we got into a fight into the boozer on base, and then they just said, go to Sydney. Just don't go anywhere where whatever you do comes back to us. So we just got complete freedom for the weekend. Right. And then that we blew out some steam, and then you just get back to what you're doing. So, when you get that many young guys together, no one's making good decisions. No. There's no real frontal lobes kicking around making any rational decisions, especially after a dozen beers. So no. It was a good experience. It was a lot of fun. Used some cool stuff. And then we sort of had the choice of either going to a 2 RAR up in Townsville or a 3 RAR in Holsworthy, which was still the airborne battalion at that point in time.
And what did you have a preference of where you wanted to go?
I actually would have gone 1 RAR if it had been offered, and I couldn't tell you why. I just thought 1 RAR would be a really good place to go. I didn't know much about Townsville, and there's no difference between 1 and 2, so I don't know why 2 RAR wasn't of interest to me. But I hadn't really thought about 3, and then when they offered 3 RAR and the opportunity to jump out of planes, that really intrigued me. I'd always had a fear of heights growing up, so I thought, what better way to tackle that or confront that than to get in an aircraft and jump out of it. And I hadn't actually been in an aircraft at that point in my life, so I've never travelled out of state. I don't think air travel was that common back then. Certainly not where I grew up.
Mate, I know that myself. The first time I got on a plane, I think I was 10 years old, and old Ansett, mate, was still around. So that's you go. That's going back, Ansett, mate, that no longer exists. They were a great carrier in Australia, but I know what you're saying. That was just travel was not a thing.
Yeah, we just drove for holidays, be a couple of hours. We'd never flown interstate. Growing up, all our family was in New South Wales essentially, so we never really had any reason. And my parents, we didn't have the money to go travelling too far anyway on a family holiday. So I'd never got into a plane, so I thought, why not? I didn't know what it was like to be in a plane to take off. So it can't hurt to jump out of it the first time I got up. So it was kind of the allure of that is what drove, ultimately, a decision was made for me to go to Holsworthy down in Liverpool. I wasn't a massive fan of going to Liverpool, but I was curious, and that's where I ended up. So.
Yeah, right. So, mate, you march into 3RAR, mate, and I've had a few 3RAR boys on from the early days of the mid-90s to late 90s. What was that like when you got to 3RAR?
It wasn't too bad. So I got there late 90s. So it was just on the back end of some of their sort of more exciting, or one of the more exciting periods they'd been through, I suppose, without going into a lot of detail around it. They'd had some grief. So they were sort of on the back end of that. But you can still see the echoes of it. Like, there were still remnants there of some of the stuff. And my first section commander was one of the guys who was involved in some of the issues. But he was a pretty good dude. I never had any issues with him. And we never really spoke about much of the stuff that he'd done previously. So it wasn't too bad. And I think they'd kind of just come on the back end of beating up all the new guys for the sake of beating them up. So we never really got touched up or beat up for the sake of it. But I know a lot of guys who are probably 1 to 2 years in front of me had that experience. And again, it's just one of those things that happens because it's always happened, but no one really understands why they're doing it anymore and why it would even be valuable. So the reception wasn't too bad. They did send all the new march-ins into Bravo Company, though, so it was just full of all what they call the lids. And I'm sure guys on your show have explained that to you.
Yep.
So we had all the lids in one company at one time. So when it came to Blood Week, which is where it's just a week full of sport between the companies, Bravo Company, wherever it was heavily targeted by the other companies. So we got pounded the first year really hard. We had a lot of injuries, which worked really well for the battalion because then they had everyone to do all the guards over the Christmas period. Not so well for the guys that were injured. But yeah, ultimately it wasn't too bad. You know, I didn't have anything to compare it to. Like, there's a little bit of violence there, but if you've got 500-600 men there, you're going to see a little bit of conflict.
Of course.
So ultimately, I don't think it was too bad. Like, MPs would make a big deal out of it and talk about that sort of thing. But I only seen a few fights for the 3 or 4 years I was there. Nothing major. I did see a lot of camaraderie, those sort of things. Like, we went to Malaysia on a Butterworth trip, which was really interesting as a young guy. And it's just a piss trip. Everyone goes over there and carries on. You do some cool training in the jungle and those sort of things. But ultimately, my experience there wasn't too bad. I didn't love it as a long-term job. Like, it's fun as a young guy because you live in, everything's paid for, so you don't have to save any money, which is a problem because you're actually not saving any money. So you're on the road to nowhere. But as a young guy, it's really good. Like, you're just surrounded by other young guys. You know, you got good freedom on the weekend as long as you're back for work. No one really minds. As long as you don't get into trouble, no one's really going to get upset. And it's not hard to go out and have a good time. And you're, 50, 60 minutes away from the city. So we were in the city a lot and that sort of thing. But yeah, it was a pretty good experience. But sort of 4 to 5 years was probably going to be my time there because as a job, it just wasn't going to go anywhere. I thought, like, it's a fun job. But for me, being in the infantry or being in the military, living under the sort of conditions that you're under as far as the lack of freedom that you do have in a job. Like, it's very regimented. Like, you have been indoctrinated into that process. And for me, that wasn't the way I was going to live my life. So it was sort of, after that 4 to 5 years, I was looking at I'd probably go and do something. But I had joined the military with the intent of doing selection anyway. So I sort of thought, I'll give selection a go. If that doesn't work out, then I'll go find something else to do.
Yeah, right. And you do, because you're in 3RAR, so you do your para course and get your wings and what? Because I've heard so many stories, mate, of near misses and guys that sputtered in hard and hurt themselves. What do you remember of your para course?
I didn't think it was that bad. Like, the training, it's actually one of the better training courses that they do because it's all relative to jumping. And, like, they walk you through the process. So the first time you jump out of a plane, you have done all the segments as best you can as close to actual parachuting. So it's actually not too bad. Like, there's the initial shock as you jump out, or that sort of sensory overload when you jump out of the plane the first time because you're unable to predict what it's going to feel like. So your brain's kind of just rattling around in your head, huge uncertainty. So out you go. And you don't really, or I don't, really remember a lot of detail, about the first jump. Like, I was out, I remember the plane kind of whizzing past, you're in the air, body's really tense as you sort of, because you're not actually stable in the air because there's not enough friction to be able to stabilise. So you're kind of just getting thrown around in the wind a little bit, and then chute deploys, and you can feel that straight away once it's deployed. And it's a really nice feeling because at least it's likely to work properly. Yeah. It's very reassuring when that happens. And then you're sort of in the air for a little bit, and that's kind of cool, nice and relaxing, and then you're on the ground. So
yeah, right. Because you're jumping, 1,000 feet?
Yeah, 1,000 feet under just a round canopy. So you can't steer it, but you don't want 1,000 people in the air steering chutes anyway. So I was involved in a couple of full battalion jumps, and there's so many parachutes in the air that you don't want people steering. Like, you want everyone basically moving with the wind in the same direction at roughly the same speed. And even then you have a heap of collisions in the air, so you don't want people going everywhere. And then you just keep going through that process of jumping and you get qualified. So I actually didn't mind it. It wasn't too bad. Yeah.
Did you get extra pay, mate, once you got your wings? Or
yeah, you do. I think you get parachute allowance, I think.
Yeah.
I have no idea what that would be worth, but it was a little bit.
Well, it wouldn't be the last jump you do, mate, because you're going to the SAS, so you do a few more in your time of when you're over in the regiment, and you get your para wings, mate, and then you deploy to East Timor in 1999. So what was your role over there, and how long were you deployed for?
So we went over on the second day. So they sent 2 RAR over in the planes. So they landed at the airfield. And from my understanding, that was a deliberate strategy because they didn't want to have airborne forces in planes, because if you drop paratroopers into a country, it's an invasion, essentially. So they sent 2 RAR in the planes. At that stage, I think the assumption was it was going to be an unopposed landing, so they would actually be allowed to come in. If that didn't happen, I don't know what the plan was. Like, you hear different rumours, I've no idea what the plan was. So they landed, they came and secured the wharf, and then we came in on the Jarvis Bay, which was a ferry that they'd, I think, leased, that was doing Bass Strait runs. So we came on that, and then we're in Dili for 2 to 3 weeks, I think it is, just doing patrols, setting up a few firm areas. So we were at the airfield for a little bit, and then we were at the soccer field for a little bit, and just doing some patrols around there. Not a lot going on. Like, you'd hear reports of things, and you'd patrol out, and it'd be either nothing there or something may have happened about 2 hours before you actually got there. Like, some of the patrols would come across, I think a couple of times they came across a few bodies. There was a massive crocodile in there with a whole heap of skeletons around it that they came across. So a lot of the buildings had all blood through them. So for a lot of the areas, we were just staying in old abandoned buildings. So you could definitely see that there had been a lot going on. Like, whatever happened before we got there would not have been nice to be involved in. Like, they were pretty brutal. So there was definite signs that there'd been some brutality there. It was sort of, by the time we got there, it was mostly over. We worked with the Gurkhas for a little bit. And they were pretty good. I don't think they liked the Indonesians, so their aid stations weren't very effective at handing out any aid to anybody. I think they were involved in a little bit of brutality, potentially. But we sort of hung around there for a little bit in Dili, and then we moved up into the mountains and replaced an actual SAS patrol that had been up there, up around Maliana, I think that was the name of the village. And that was up on the border, so we were doing border patrols up until the point where we had a big standoff with the Indonesians because we'd lured one of the bad guys across the border, and then he got crash tackled, and then we sort of, it was a big gun pointing standoff on the road, and then we got moved back by the AFP just to reduce tension. So we stayed there for a little bit, then went up into the enclave. Just chilled out up there for, I think it was a 6-month trip in total there. Came back, I think, February 2000, just after or a bit after the new year.
So you mentioned that the SAS, and you'd always had that inkling to go and do selection. Was that the first time you had seen the SAS in field?
Yeah, it was the first time I seen them in field. So when I was in Sydney, they'd come across for the Olympics, and I was in recon at that point in time, which actually wasn't that long before I went to Timor. One of the guys that was in recon platoon was ex-1RAR, so he had a couple of mates, good mates I've got now, that were in the SAS at the time. So they came along, or came into where we were staying for a bit, but I actually didn't interact with them there. And then we seen them on the range a couple of times doing some practice assaults. And then, up in Timor, we literally got off a chopper, they got on the chopper and left, and that was what I'd seen of them. And that happened twice, so I think we'd gone into the mountain area, then we went up into the enclave, we replaced them. And that was basically my interactions. I'd never really seen anything about them, never heard much about what they did, didn't know anyone that had ever been there. It was a complete mystery to me.
Yeah, right. So you come back from Timor, first deployment under the belt, and then, mate, in 2001, you go on selection. And talk me through this process. And did you obviously applied to go and do the testing to see and go on selection? So, mate, what was the process back then?
Yeah, so when I first applied, it was actually in 99. So it was just a paper application, and then I think you sit some psych testing, or you do like the psych survey. I don't even know what one it was back then. I don't even know what they do now, to be fair. So you do that. I think they go, you submit your medical documents, and there's like a paper review just to make sure that there's no real big flags that they need to be aware of about you before you go. So if you don't present well on the psych instrument, clearly for good reason, they probably don't want you. If you've had ACL reconstruction, shoulder reconstruction, those sort of things, so a significant medical injury or surgery, then you're not likely to get on, and for good reason, like dental, all that sort of thing. So they go through that sort of fitness. I think if you've been a disciplinary issue, then you're probably not likely to get on. So that stuff's just reviewed as like a paper review. And then from there, I was invited, and it was held up the road where a 4RAR used to be, the 2 Commando when they were 4RAR during that transitionary period. So it was held up there, and it was back when they had a 3-day barrier. So they trialled a 3-day barrier test as a mini selection, which is different from the SFET that they run now. So it went up there. Day one was weapons testing, like TOETs, just like basic skills testing or craft testing, some assessments, an interview, a few bits and pieces. I can't remember completely what it was. And then I think day two was a long NAVEX. So I think it might have started with a 20 clicker maybe, and then into a NAVEX. And then day three was like a mini lucky dip. So it's just a bunch of different work capacity exercises, problem solving of just trivial problems that you're not really going to solve, but it's just the fact that it's keeping you occupied for 12 hours and a bit of sleep deprivation mixed in there with it. So at the end of that, you go through a bit of a panel, and I'd initially applied to go to 4RAR at the time because it was prior to 2 Commando, and the RSM from Perth had just come across to be their RSM and asked me if he panelled me for selection or why I didn't want to go for SAS in the first place. And I said that I was still young in my career. I was interested to go to 4RAR, develop my skills a little bit, then go to Perth or go west. And nothing against 2 Commando. Like you can say I was using it as a stepping stone.
Yeah, of course.
And people can perceive that however they want. But back then there was the difference between the units was much bigger. So went to do that, and then he sort of suggested, he said, okay, well, if I panel you for selection in Perth, will you turn up? And I said, well, if you put me on there, I'm going to turn up. So I got panelled to go to Perth. I went to Timor, and then a signal came across to Timor asking whether I was actually going to go to Perth or whether I wanted to stay in Timor. And because no one had deployed for such a long period of time, I said, oh, look, I'm going to start on deployment, and I was still under this false hope that something might happen while I was there. It wasn't just going to be a really long, boring trip with huge heat and no food. So I deferred I said, oh, no, I'm not going to come back. I'll have to go through the process again next year. And nothing happened. I just got bored in Timor.
and ate ration packs.
Yeah. So, but it was fine. I don't regret that choice. Like, it's a year. And back then, like, a year is nothing. And I tell that to my kids now around different things. Like, it's a year. Like, it's...
And it's all building, it's all found out. And it probably helped you. Timor probably helped you when you're on selection.
Well, I came back and did the recon course at 3RAR. I think I did the recon course before I left, but I came back and went into recon platoon and then instructed on the next recon course that year. So as far as preparation for the patrol course, the recon course is essentially a watered down patrol course. So it definitely did give me some skills. I'd spent a lot more time in the bush doing navigation, so my nav skills were really current. I was really familiar with how to navigate effectively, which is a huge thing, having seen the amount of people that get lost over the years on selection. So there was definitely things that I had done, plus I'd had time to actually train. Not that I utilised it that well when I was in Sydney, but I had some time to train for selection, where if I came back from Timor, whatever I came back with, that was my fitness. And talking to the guys that did come through that year, it was quite a brutal selection. So it was in Singleton, it rained a lot, and they said it was quite tough. So then I come back from Timor, same process. So they'd run the same process the second year. This time my application was direct for SAS. I think the third day was slightly different, but similar sort of 3-day thing. And from that, I got panelled onto the selection course, which was I think was going to be January 2001 at that stage. And from the initial 200 or so people that apply on paper. I think it's about 120 people got panelled to come or to do one of the 3-day barriers. And then from that, I think it was just over 30 people panelled to come to Perth. I think 1 or 2 didn't turn up. There was about 30 of us that started that selection course, which was quite small.
Yeah, so it's a high attrition rate, mate, from the 200.
Yeah, so I don't know whether they did it to save money on airfares, getting people to Perth or what it was, but it's the smallest selection I've ever seen start over there.
Right.
And knowing how many people are involved in that thing, there was way more DS on that than what there was actual students. So obviously, they trimmed down some of the DS because they just didn't need them. But there seemed to be a lot of staff around all the time compared to how many students were. So there was definitely no hiding on that course, that's for sure.
Yeah, right. So, mate, you get over there January 2001. You go on selection, and what do you remember of selection? And then what was the toughest part of selection? Looking back,
I knew it was going to be hard. Like there's no kidding yourself around that. You know it's going to be hard. My training was average at best. So it started out well intended to follow the 12 weeks that I had back then. So it was a 12-week course written by the PDI over that time. It was Shane Saltmarsh, which most people prior to probably 2008 would be familiar with that 12-week program. So I followed that for probably pretty well for the first 4 or 5 weeks, but because I'd come back from Timor and I had all this cash, I'd gone backpacking. I decided to go backpacking in the US over Christmas. So I was a young bloke backpacking in America. So there was more drinking than training going on while I was over there. The only thing that probably saved me was that every time I went, so just say I went down to San Diego, each morning or probably 3 to 4 mornings a week, I would fill my backpack with as many bottles of water as I could. So I was collecting all my bottles of water, filling them up with water, just as much weight as I could, and then I'd walk around San Diego. So I'd just go on these really long 4 to 5 hour stomps just to see the sights. Like if I wanted to go to check out where the zoo was, then I would walk there. So I was doing a lot of pack marching when I was there, a couple gym sessions, a couple runs. So I do enjoy early morning runs in new cities just to have a look around before everyone starts to come out. Because you can run through pretty much most areas early in the morning with less issue. Like there's still people coming back from their nights and that sort of thing. But it's a nicer time to run. So I was still doing a little bit of that, but nowhere near the volume of what I should have been doing. And I knew I was going to have to pay the piper for it. So that was my preparation for the most part. Came back, went home, tried to play a bit of catch up. There was no chance of it. I wasn't that fit. And thankfully they didn't run all the terminal testing when we first got there. Otherwise I probably would have just been put on the aircraft and sent back. So my fitness was definitely not great, and that got pointed out to me a few times early on, quite directly, that whether people actually asked, like, did you actually train for this? And the answer was not really, but I didn't tell them that. Just kind of grunted and tried to ignore the problem.
Yeah, which makes it hard with a small number on selection.
But they yelled at everyone. And within 2 or 3 days, everyone's tired. So by then, it starts to even itself out. So even if you turn up really fit, you just get fatigued really fast, unless you're really good at conserving your energy. And they make sure, like, there's people that are trying to make sure you're not doing that. So you do your first few days. It's just a lot of PT. There's some education stuff, some short navigation, and then you go on your long Navex, which is about 5 days. So I just remember we did that in Collie, which is quite undulating. Like it's not, you don't travel huge distances down there, but it's fairly close country in some areas of it, and some of the hills you're almost walking into Lantana the whole way. Oh, fuck, and it was hot. I just remember that. I remember it was hot, and there was some hills, and I learned very early after the first day that I was going to be doing a lot of contouring. So, like if I walked 9 Ks on paper that day, it was probably more like 14, 15 contouring. So I was doing a lot of contouring. The heat was pretty excessive in January, so it was tough going, and I got to the end, and I think I'd only done about 50 Ks or a little bit over, and I thought, that's pretty low. They're probably going to bin me at the end of this. And it turns out that I was about right on the average, or just a little bit above the average. People just weren't getting very far. But when we came back as a group, first thing everyone's talking about is, I got nowhere. Like, and then everyone's like, I didn't get anywhere either, so don't sweat it. Every little thing you do wrong gets picked up, so you think that there's this huge pile of paperwork on you about all the things you've done wrong, and you do a heap of stuff wrong. And then you sort of go on to the longer phase. You go on to sort of the last phase of it where you sleep deprivation, all the work sort of thing. So remember, it wasn't too bad up until that point. So you're counting days, like you're going from meal to meal, day to day. You know it's going to end eventually. You just don't know how much work you have to get through to get there. When we were going through the final phase, I remember there were a couple of points in time there where I was so fatigued, I was so tired, so sore, and we're carrying rockets to take to the guerrilla army or something. I can't remember. It was something really heavy. And we'd been going for ages, and I had no idea where we were going, and I thought at some point this has to stop. They just can't keep making us carry this all day. But they kept making us carry it all day, and then you get to a boat, and you're like, nothing good is coming from a boat. So there's this Zodiac there, and then paddling up this river or across the dam. But just the amount of work that you get through. Like, there's points there where I thought, okay, this has to stop soon because there's a limit to how much work we can actually get through before people start collapsing. But then you realise that what you thought was your limit is not. And that was a couple of hours ago, and now you're still going. So that was probably the hardest bit, was going beyond what you thought you were capable of and continuing to push. But ultimately, I knew if I was there at the end, then I was a chance of being picked up. So and the attitude I had before I left was, no matter what, I'm not going to voluntarily withdraw. I'll either get injured and they'll take me off, or won't see whatever they're looking for in me and they'll remove me, or I'll get to the end and they'll either say thanks but no thanks, or they'll let me in. That was literally the way I seen it. And I kind of looked at it that lesser people than me had passed, better people than me had failed. So there was no reason why I couldn't get there.
It's a good mindset to have too, because you're not setting yourself going. There's not that doubt of, well, I might just do that voluntary withdrawal, and so that mindset is good. You've set that before you even start. So
I just went on there, and I kind of look back at a lot of it now, and I look at the amount of information, the effectiveness of some of and there's some good and bad physical preparation programs out there. Literally all of them are better than the one I did. And nothing against that program. It's just that we know so much more about human performance now. All the information to get through there's way more of it, but the rates aren't changing. And it's literally just a mental game. So obviously we're falling over in the mental capacity for people to do it. So they should be turning up with better physical capacity. Their technical capacity as far as skills go isn't that important at that point, because everything you need will get trained or will get demonstrated or shown. It's the mental capacity for me that is where things are lacking. So it's kind of the exposure to it. So we've almost got to a point where we're not exposing people to enough of it, so they're not developing their capacity. If they turn up to selection, they're fitter, their physical capacity is much better. So perceptually, as far as effort goes, it's going to be easier. But we're not getting higher pass rates because their mental capacity has come down, so it's kind of offsetting that increase in physical capacity. And that's kind of my theoretical assessment on it. So there's a lot more to be done in that space, I think.
Oh, definitely.
And it's a big mind game. Everyone knows it. Like, once you've had no food and no sleep, the perception of what you can do goes right down, and everything seems way harder than what it is. Like, even flat ground looks like a hill. And I experienced that years later, and I don't know whether we'll get to it or not, on some of my extreme adventure racing, is that I hadn't slept, I think I'd slept maybe 8 hours in 3 or 4 days and covering huge distance, and I thought I was walking uphill, and I knew there was a river. I was walking to a river, and I was like, there's no way I'm walking uphill to a river. But perceptually, it was all uphill, and it even felt like I was walking uphill because I was that drained. And that goes to some of the stuff that I've looked at in science. But there's a huge amount of that, and even understanding that it's not the case, that's just your brain trying to get you to stop.
That's right.
So it's definitely a big mental challenge. And at that point, it was the hardest thing I'd ever done. And it's really hard to stay awake towards the end, and you think you're going to get shit canned because you're constantly fighting sleep. And you get caught sleeping here and there. And we got in a lot of trouble because one of the officers that was leading it decided that we were going to run a picket one night instead of building I think we were building a hut or something out in the middle of nowhere all night. And the point is just so you don't go to sleep. And he's like, we'll do a picket, we'll be right. And everyone's like, this is not going to work. But we got to go to sleep. So we went with his plan. 20 minutes later, there's a DS in there stomping around, yelling. The guy that was supposed to be on picket fell asleep straight away. So he doesn't have his minimi anymore. We're getting back to work, pretending that nothing's wrong. And then there's like whispers of where's this minimi, and then most people are like, I think I know where that is. And then eventually we convinced the guy that was in charge, you've got to go ask the DS about that minimi. And of course he had it. So we did a lot more work the next day on the back of that. And that stuff kind of makes you laugh. Like, you do it on extra work, but it's kind of amusing. So I let little amusements kind of keep me going. And if you get the right people in there and everyone has a bit of a dry sense of humour. You can use all those sort of things to help you with those sort of almost like micro recovery.
Yeah, right.
From day to day. So it just kind of, you just keep dredging through it and get to the end, and then they come out and tell you whether you're going to go forward or not.
So you finally get through after pretty intense, which you knew it would be anyway, and as you said at the start, you're a bit undercooked with the fitness side. So you get through, and how many finished with you after you started selection and finished?
Yeah, so on that one we had, I think it was 7 get through to the finish.
Wow.
Yeah, so we only had one patrol at the end of it, and we didn't even have enough people for the amount of stores that were allocated, so they actually had to manipulate it a little bit. Because we just couldn't achieve the first few activities. We just physically didn't have the ability to do it. So there was 3 ORs, 4 officers. One of the officers didn't make it through. I think 2 of them went back to their unit and 1 stayed.
Yeah,
and
right.
There was 3 ORs, and I think one of them potentially came through just because they didn't have many people. It was like, all right, we'll give him benefit of the doubt. Like, there's 3 ORs. So it's like, that would have been the shortest board of studies ever.
Yeah.
And I think they just gave everyone the benefit of the doubt. And so off we went. But we didn't really have enough people to run all the courses for the training cycle that follows. So it was sort of disjointed. And we did it, the courses that we could do, and they ran a second selection in the August of that year, which they picked up, I think, in around 14, 15.
Yeah,
so,
right.
Which was enough to actually then go ahead and run a full selection cycle.
So you talk about... Yeah. So, mate, you just mentioned that the next course of selection came through in August, and then 9/11, mate, a game changer for the Australian Army and armies all around the world. What do you remember of 9/11, and did you foresee, mate, that you would be, deployed to the Middle East for the next 16 years of your life?
Yeah, so we were midway through one of our courses when it happened, but we were still on base. I remember it was an evening that happened. Everyone came in there, and there's going to be some type of response. Like, things have just changed. It's one of those almost surreal events where you kind of moving along fat, dumb and happy in your own little world, and all of a sudden you're reminded about what can go on in the rest of the world. And you see that play out every now and then. People are instantly reminded of just how safe they have been, and potentially that the rest of the world's not quite what they think it is. So that happened. There was definitely some talk the next day. We just went on with our courses, like, your Rios, get back to work, you're not involved in anything, so, go and finish your course. You're not here yet. You get told that pretty regularly, so we just focused on doing what we needed to do. The first squadron deployed at some point not long after that, so from memory, I think it was 1 squadron maybe, or 2 squadrons, I can't remember. So they deployed, and we knew there'd be follow-on rotation, so I knew some point they would go. The next one to rotate was going to be 3 squadron, and they were a little bit short of people or staffing, so it came down that because I'd already had my parachute wings, so being at 3 hour paid off for me in this instance, and there was another guy who had come out of the Reserve Commando from Melbourne who also had his parachute wings. So it was declared that once we got to a certain point in our reinforcement cycle, there was only a couple of courses that needed to happen, and one of them was parachute course, and I'd already done all the other courses I need to in that period I'd been waiting, so I was literally qualified to go to the squadron. So me and him were then sent to 3 squadron, met up with them in Queensland during CHOGM, I think it was at that point in time, the first CHOGM that, I can't remember whether that one went ahead or not. So we met up with them there, did a little bit of training, bare minimum training, got to know everyone a little bit, and then a week off, and then we're into Afghanistan. So I went over there as sort of quite a young soldier from the regiment, so literally straight off my reinforcement cycle into the deep end, essentially, and off we went for a 6-month rotation.
So you deploy for your first trip which wouldn't be your last, in 2002, and mate, talk me through that first trip, because it's very different and mission profiles change as you go back in years to come, but that first trip, and I've had a number of the boys on from the regiment, it was very different, wasn't it, compared to how Connecticut would get later on?
Yeah, so that went under ICATS for that one, so International Coalition Against Terror. Most of the Taliban, and I don't even know where Al-Qaeda sits, like there's different theories as to whether it ever existed, whether it was a made-up organisation, that sort of thing, but everyone had gone. Everyone that was going to be targeted had gone into Pakistan. And this isn't their first rodeo. Like, they've been doing this forever. They were, those fighters over there were born into this. And they know every occupying force at some time leaves. If history's told them one thing, is that at some point they all leave because there's nothing there. No one that grows up in Western society is going to live in that country. So they knew we were going to leave at some point. But we all had homes to go to. We'd rotate through, and then our governments would get sick of it. So they essentially knew they just had to wait it out. So we'd go along. I think the actual battle for the Northern Alliance against the Taliban lasted a week or two.
Yeah, right.
It didn't last very long. Like, I can't remember the exact period, maybe longer. But it was over long before I got there. So the Northern Alliance had pushed through Afghanistan, cleared out the Taliban or pushed them into Pakistan. They're just sitting there waiting. So we were doing a lot of driving. We had complete freedom of movement as long as you didn't go into areas that were mined, and they were mostly marked. Not always, but mostly marked with coloured rocks, these sort of things. You could see indicators for mines, and you just didn't go off-road. If cars were driving on it, it was generally safe. If there was no one there, then you'd be a bit dubious about driving on things. But I don't know, maybe we drove through some areas we shouldn't have, maybe we didn't. I don't know. You couldn't always tell, but we'd just drive around, seeing what we could see. We come under fire on a couple of occasions, but nothing significant. I think one night we got fired at by, I think it was 14.5, what it was, the anti-aircraft guns, just because we didn't know the signals to move forward. They thought we were bandits. So they started firing these things over the top of us, and they're pretty loud. And then one of our patrols got compromised about midway through the trip. That was quite a significant event for them, so they had to drop their packs. They had an unqualified signal with them that turned out to be quite an issue later on, so I think he ultimately took his life some years later. And there was discussions around who should be allowed out on patrol, which kind of got put by the wayside years later anyway. So they sort of went out, and then we went out to extract them. So we had to drive through a valley, which was heavy weapons all down one side, and as soon as we got into the valley, it was dark, and they just lit us up. We had a gunship turn up, which gave us enough overwatch to get through there, but it just looked like a really cool fireworks show. I just remember watching all this trace streaming down from the hills towards us, and you could see early on that it was not going to be accurate, so I wasn't too concerned. Like, you're still not happy, but it was just quite interesting to watch, and then you're watching the expected gunship fire back sort of thing. So it was quite, like I said, a cool fireworks show.
So for the civilian listener, Dan, I just want to say the Spectre gun, it's like artillery on wings, isn't it? Like,
yeah, so it's a C-130, which is a cargo ship, completely gutted, and they put a cannon in there, two different cannons I think it is. I think one's a 40mm, one's a howitzer or something, I can't remember, 80mm maybe, I don't know. I'm not a big gun fan, I'm not a big data guy. And then there's a minigun and a couple other things. I don't know. This thing is awesome, I know that much. Yeah. And it flies at low level, so it only flies at night.
Yep.
No, but if you're lucky enough to have one around, and it's got all sorts of sensors all over the thing. Like, it's just a flying weapons platform, that's all it is.
Yeah,
like,
right.
It has one role in the US military, and it does it with huge effect. So anyone that's played the Call of Duty game would have played with it, sitting in the sky, just wiping out everything. So it's really effective. So it's really handy, and I've seen it in action twice while I was over there. In support of our actions. So that was one of them. Leading into that, it was quite intense because I was in the lead, or I was driving the lead car, and we'd come out of the desert towards one of the villages right on sunset, and they knew we were coming to get them. They just watched us drive out of the desert. And they knew one of our patrols, or that there was fighting going on further up. So driving through that village was real quiet. There was a lot of combat indicators. And that was probably the first time that I've been really concerned for my life, was going around these corners. You know, am I going to see a big machine gun flash out of one of these bushes? Is there someone waiting around the next corner of a compound? This sort of thing. So it was, for me, it was kind of, a high anxiety sort of period driving into it, because I knew at some point this was going to go. I just didn't know whether I'd have warning, where it was going to be, those sort of things. So you're fairly anxious driving in, and it's at that period where it's not dark enough to use MVGs, but it's not light enough where you can see effectively. So anyone in waiting would have definitely had the advantage, but it turns out there was no one waiting. So as the deal with anxiety in a lot of circumstances, it's kind of unfounded and nothing ever manifests, but your brain doesn't know that. There's a lot of uncertainty, so it's still telling you that this is probably the worst idea you've ever had. And maybe you should have tanked it on selection so you can find yourself. It's like, how the fuck did I get myself into this?
Yeah, that's right.
But you do your job, you know what I mean? Like, there's all this constant little videos running in your head about, what would machine gun bursts coming out of that bush over there look like? And chances are you probably never would see it anyway. But you're competing with those sort of mental imagery of worst case scenario with, all right, where do I need to keep on the track up here? Okay, which way do I need to go up here? So you're constantly balancing that threat with task information, which is essentially what performance is as long as you maintain higher focus on the task relevant stuff and keep doing that, then you can generally do your job okay. It's when you're too distracted by the threat or the salience and that takes over all of your thought patterns, all of the way you process information, that you run into trouble. So it was just an early opportunity to learn how to do that, essentially. Under no actual real threat within that area, but it was just the perception of it. So we get through there, get into that, we get those guys, we come out, and that was an all-night affair. But that was probably the only real action that we're involved in, other than just some pot shots, the occasional rocket, some little bit of shit. So it was a fairly long, boring trip of sitting in the desert, doing very little.
Yeah, right. And did you lose anyone on that trip, or had they lost Andy the trip before?
Yeah, so he was on the trip before us, so we'd pretty much replaced them maybe 2 to 3 weeks after that. So that was towards the end. They'd lost Andy. Not one of their guys got hurt, I think, standing on a mine. So they'd had a couple casualties. We went away, other than guys getting really sick, and I mean really sick, our trip was fairly uneventful.
Yeah, right.
So most people got stomach bugs, got pretty crook over there. If they didn't on that trip, they certainly did on a trip.
Yeah, you would have, I'm sure.
Yeah, I got it pretty bad on that one.
Yeah.
At one point, it was just before we went out, so I was tied to the turret, literally on the way out, and I was like, try and get some sleep, and they just literally tied me up there. Drive out. The next morning, I started to feel a little bit better. So I've been pumped full of IV fluids, that sort of thing. Like, did everything they could medically, and I was like, we've got to go. So I was like, all right, fine. But you can't drive, so I just strapped me into the turret, and off we went.
So you come back from, as I said, the first of many deployments to Afghanistan, and you come back, and what's happening at the regiment when you get back?
It just does its thing. Like, I came back. There's a couple of mates from Australia at that point in time, so they just ran on the selection, so pretty excited. It's cool to be home. There's always that feeling of, I'm back in civilization, that sort of thing. So you go back, and it's like a little bit of a buzz for a little bit, then you settle back into it. They'd started up the dual tags on both coasts at that point, so we had a tag east, a tag west, and we had guys in Afghanistan, so we were stretched well beyond belief.
Yeah, right.
Which was part of the reason why 2 Commando was stood up and given the tag east. Was like, all right, well, we don't have enough people in special operations to maintain this, so we need to actually look at this seriously. So they took over tag east, and with that comes a lot of resources, a lot of funding, so they were pretty happy with that, I think. So we kind of went back just to focus on tag west. Pong Su came about the next year, so I deployed on recovery of the Pong Su, which I think was Easter Sunday. So we got Easter Friday, we got the call, flew out. Couldn't get a plane, so we just waited around for the Qantas flight the next morning, got on that, turned up, went out, boarded the Pong Su, brought that back, which was, again, another really cool little mission. You go through your normal training, like, life just goes on. The regiment just keeps moving forward. It just adds Afghanistan as another one of its tasks.
Yeah, right.
At that stage, we'd done the 3 rotations, and that was it. We pulled out. A couple of years later, the war in Iraq kind of starts kicking off, and they were only deploying 1 squadron for that, so I wasn't involved in the initial Iraq deployment, and that was a one-off. They had a certain line. As soon as they hit that line, that's it. They're coming back. So we left some elements there to help out with security for the embassy and those other elements. We threw our main forces, and that was us. Again, back into training. And we kind of hadn't really considered going back into Afghanistan. You keep your eye on it. You watch what the Americans are doing. And I think it was around 2006, I think, when they had the combat increased significantly. And there was a couple incidences, which was the impetus for us then redeploying back into Afghanistan. It might have been 2005.
Yeah, I think it was 05.
I can't remember the specific dates. My rotation was 2006 on that one. And again, things had changed a little bit. We were driving around still. We just had no other way of getting around. We had no resources.
Because, fixed wing and that hadn't come in
yet.
Yeah,
we didn't have anything. They had. The Americans got resources. We didn't. But we were partnering with the Dutch on this occasion, so we were driving around with a Dutch crew or Dutch element. This was probably a lot more kinetic activity. So that was probably the most kinetic activity I think I'd seen on a rotation. There was a lot of long-range or heavy weapons fighting with vehicles. Pretty much every village we went to, there was a long-range interaction. The IEDs and mines and that hadn't really become a problem, so we still had freedom of movement, which has been quite careful. But again, we went there for 4 months on that one. On that one, we had a casualty early on. One of the guys took some RPG shrapnel to the face on a contact very early on.
Yeah, right.
I don't think we had any other injuries. But we were out a lot on that one. So
And a lot of kinetic fighting.
Yeah, so we'd be out for 2 to 3 weeks. We'd come back 4 or 5 days and be out again. So that was sort of a really high tempo deployment for 4 months. Really cool, really good deployment. But again, it was mostly operating in the desert, not very much in around the villages, those sort of things. And then when we came back, we handed over to the Reconstruction Task Force with the regular army, and we withdrew. But again, found ourselves back there very shortly after.
Yeah, yeah. And I'll just go back a touch for... So when you deployed in 02, you'd come off Rio and they make a big thing of it now to present your beret. Did you actually have that, or was it just now you're part of the Dan, here you go?
I think they rushed it. Then we had the Governor-General come in, tell some stories, hand them out.
Yeah.
But yeah, it wasn't as big procession as what it is now. So I think we had maybe 2 weeks' notice or something, and it was like, oh, if you want to invite a relative, let us know. No one really did. It was in between some courses. So, I don't know, like it's still a pretty good ceremony. You go there, they do their thing, hand out the berets to everybody, and you go back, and so now you can stop wearing your bush hat or whatever other hat. But it's a much more mature environment there as far as that goes. Like, you're not walking around with people calling out lead and all this stuff like, oh,
yeah.
That's Rio. Everyone knows who the Rios are. They know they're guys in training, you know. Senior guys sort of talk to you. Everyone's sort of curious as where you came from, all this sort of stuff. So it's a completely different environment, but it's nice once you get past that milestone, because now you pass that training hurdle, you're into the squadron, you can start actually getting to work. Because if you think from initial application through all the selection, through the training, that's around about a 2.5 year process.
Yeah.
So
it's a long time.
To get to, at the end of that 2.5 years is quite rewarding. And a lot of it, you're never really sure whether you're actually going to get there. Like, there are things that you think are outside your hands or your sphere of control. So, yeah, it's a rewarding accomplishment. But again, the next day, you're just back to work.
Yeah. And I've spoken to a lot of guys from both 2 Commando and from the regiment as well. And they've said, you know, the feeling once you get it, you're proud of it, but it's only that, like, it's just like it's the first peak of the mountain, and then there's other peaks that you need to, and having a long career, not just, you know, just being obsessed with the colour of the beret. That's it. As you say, you're back to work, and
it's like a rite of passage type of thing, which I think a lot of places lack or miss. I think that's something that's done really well there. It's a really long rite of passage, but that's just the admission fee. And then you go to work, and you know, you go to squadron, and you're the most inexperienced, newest person, the least competent person in that squadron. So you've got some work to do. And people, like, yeah, you know, congratulations, you passed selection, you got to this point, well done. Now you've got to show us that you belong here, essentially.
That's right.
And in some instances, I think that was more brutal in some of the feedback I received there than anywhere else. Especially now that we're playing for keeps. 100%. So there's some people there who are really serious about it. It's like, well, you do that, you're going to get us all killed. And you're like, all right, this is actually legit. If I do that, I am going to get someone killed. So, yeah, it's sort of, you just focus on getting back to work.
And when you, as you've just said, when you came into the regiment, you are now, like, you know, this is like the Australian Army's busiest time moving forward over the next 20 years. And before that, it was in peacetime. So now you are, when you march into the squadrons, these guys have deployed, like, and you deployed as well. So it was the guys coming off Rio were from hardened veterans that had been in combat and seen combat. So as you say, it's shut up, do your job, and get on with it. So your 06 is really kinetic. It's a really kinetic trip. 4 months, you come back, then you deploy again in 07, 08, but we can't really talk about that trip because...
Yeah, so I did a number of smaller ones, and then I did a couple which... The 21 years or whatever it is probably going to be up at some point. But it was a different style of trip. It's a non-kinetic. Still very fascinating work. But yeah, so I think that was a 6-monther. some really interesting stuff happened on that one. It was probably more interesting than the other ones, but there's just no conversation.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, you can't. And we won't. Yeah,
super convenient. But no, it was really interesting. Probably one of the most intense days I've had.
Yeah,
was probably because of the limitations that you have around you.
Yeah, right.
So, but again, it's some really good learning experiences. You come away from that with good skills. Smaller groups. You're doing some cool stuff.
But it's great experience to embed back in when you deploy again when you've got the bigger resources, and so it's all relevant. Like
so I did one of those, and then I think not long after again I was back with 3 Squadron, and there was a few different roles that guys would just rotate through over the decade or so that we were in and out of there.
So you come back from your 07, 08 trip, and then you move into a training role. So is that for just to reset, have a bit of a break?
No, it's kind of part of your career progression. So you'll do, like anywhere, you would go through the promotional process. You get to a certain point where you're just below patrol commander, so you've been 2IC for a while. And then to become a patrol commander or team leader, you've got to go through and instruct on a number of courses, and you are assessed for your leadership ability on those courses while you're instructing. So you act as a patrol commander on those. And there's a handful, depending on your insertion course, as to the duration of that and the courses you have to do. So I came back, went into that training wing, because everyone will rotate through the training wing. So it just depends on what component of you go to. So it may be just the generic selection component, it might be your insertion component. There's a few different areas there around those and some of the other skills that we have. So I went into the insertion one, so I went into our water wing, or you're either an instructor on it. Ideally, you do your instructors while you're there, so you don't have to go through this course too many times. So I went along, did my instructors while I was in the wing. Again, you get assessed as a team leader and then do all the other courses. So again, that's probably another 18 months to 2 year process. They're not back to back, they're spaced out a little bit. But that's just part of the process. So everyone will go through that. So I spent my time down there. You're really involved in selection when you're down there. You're involved in helping out training the Rios, all these sort of things. So that's kind of your instructional component. And then if you pass all that, and most people do, some people don't. It's pretty uncommon for people not to. Some people just need a little bit of extra time or work, depending on where they've been, what they've been doing, what skills they've been working on for the previous few years. And then post that, then once you've done your year in the training, then you'll go back into the squadron, completing a number of those courses, and then you'll move into patrol commander's position at some point. But you've still got to do your regular army promotional courses within that. So there's quite a bit of work to be done as you're progressing through that, which does take time, especially when you're busy, and people don't want to go and do some of the regular army stuff.
Understandable. Yeah. So is that it's good to, as you say, when you did selection, like to go back and actually help and assist on selection, and you can see like the guys, you're like, yeah, that was me, only a few years ago, and that. And as you said, there's a lot of science around it now, and it's changed from when you went through. Is it good to see, okay, this is why we're picking up there's a science behind, okay, we want that guy, or there's a reason that one doesn't get through? Or?
I think it's a lot of guesswork, personally. I'm always happy to be wrong on things. So you work on a number of them. So depending on where you are in the squadron on the cycle, based around the activities you're doing, the cycle's fluctuated over the years with based on our taskings. So if you're around and you're on the part of the cycle that supports selection, you'll go up and you'll work on selection a lot. So you'll probably work on most of it. You act as the DS. And even if you're not, you find yourself, if you don't have something to do for a week, you'll get dragged up there to help out, because it's a big demand. So I worked on a number up until that point where once you're in the training cycle, you start to see more of the background as to why we're doing things and that sort of thing. Some of it makes sense. Some of it I've kind of felt like that's how we'd always done it. So it kind of worked, so we'll keep doing it. And then you get to your board of studies and these sort of things, and there'll be times where you look at somebody and there's huge disagreement in the room about whether we want this person or not, and then it's like, all right, we'll just take him. Or one of the senior hierarchy go, no, I seen that guy yesterday, so we'll take him. He's like, well, that was yesterday. That's one day. So I don't know. I'm still on the fence. Do I have a better solution? No. So I'll keep it for what it is. Like anything, it could be better. It's probably not evolving as fast as some of the science could be informing it. And I don't know where it's at now because it's been taken off the unit. It's its own thing now that I've got nothing to do with and really don't care to comment on beyond that. I just know, looking at a lot of the science I've looked at, there are a better way to do a lot of the things that we were doing based on the more contemporary science.
Yeah.
So it wasn't available back then, but now it is. But like big organisations, it takes time for change. I just think there could be some things that are done a lot better.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, mate, it's evolution of everything, isn't it, in life?
But it's easy to throw stones when you've got nothing to do with it.
100%.
So I'm always aware of, like, it's not up to me. And it's really easy to throw stones from the position I'm in. So.
Yeah, that's right. And so you, throughout this, you know, Afghanistan's in full swing now. You're losing guys. So, you know, Matty Locke's killed in 2007. Then you lose Sean McCarthy in 2008. So we're starting to lose guys, and then you go back, do your training stuff that you need to do, and then you deploy back, mate, again in 2010, and back to Afghanistan. How had the mission profile changed from when you were there in, obviously 07, 08, you're in a different role, but your 06 trip, is this where you start to get your fixed
Yeah, so we've been in helos for a little while now. I wasn't there at the transition point, so maybe 1 to 2 rotations before. So we've managed to get some allocated rotary wing resources to us. So now we're doing more fly-in, fly-out shorter jobs, different task profile, probably more effective in that than what we would have been in vehicles. People can see vehicles coming a long way away, but they can still hear helicopters. So we're using a whole heap of strategies to try and minimise that impact. It went from night to day, which increased.
Let's talk about that.
To be fair, like, I wasn't there at the transition point again. The trip I was on in then was daytime, so it just turned up and did what I had needed to do. Obviously, daytime they can get prepared a little bit more, so we just changed our strategies a little bit around it. But there was a lot of, probably a fair bit of kinetic activity. Most of it's small, like very small skirmish to begin with, because by this time, I think we had fought hard enough to earn a reputation that once we were on the ground and settled, there's no point in fighting. You're not going to be very successful at that. So there'd be an initial skirmish, probing, and then they're in the field with a Matic or whatever it is. Like, they're a farmer again, which they were just before we turned up anyway. So there was a little bit, nothing significant. We had a few decent battles, but we didn't really lose anyone on that trip. We had a guy wounded, I think maybe a local guy wounded. But yeah, like, it was nothing too significant on the trip.
Because I remember I spoke to Weeksy about it, and I spoke to Burnsy about it as well, and that whole shift. And, you know, because I know that the US pushed back and said, no, we're going to continue, and they upped their night raids. Yeah. But Australians, for some reason, okay, we'll do it. And that's a heightened risk to you guys.
Oh,
mate. It's a huge risk to you guys, like going, because you guys own the night.
Yeah. I wasn't too concerned, to be honest. I use, like, historical perspective for a lot of what I look at. So I turned up, they asked us to go do daylight raids, fine. If that's what you want me to do, I'll go do it. At this point, I've been training for 10 years, purely for this job. My only vocation is what I'm doing right now. Like, that's it. There's no distractions outside of that. That is it. I'm going up against people who are farmers. That's their vocation, is mostly growing poppy or whatever they're being paid to grow, or whatever's not going to get them killed. They've got recycled weapons that, in some instances, probably 50 to 80 years old.
Yeah, right.
Like, there's heaps of old weapons kicking around. There's some more modern ones. It's a real lucky dip when you turn up. Some of them work, some of them don't that effectively. They are scavengers. Whatever they can scavenge, that's what they're going to use. And the longer they're there, the more they scavenge modern weapons. So you start to see it. Now they've got a really
now they've got a great...
but they're dirt farmers. So, like, I was like, well, this isn't peer on peer. Like, if I'm struggling to use my skills and my resources against a bunch of farmers, then there's something wrong here. So, like, we have all the resources in the world. Everything is done on our time, to our plan when we get there. So I wasn't too concerned. Like, if we couldn't overpower them, then there was something wrong with that. So the problem wasn't the daytime. You know, it's going to get more dangerous. People are going to get lucky. You're going to lose guys. You know, and I don't know, like, that was what we were doing. So I don't know. I was like, if you don't want to do it, that's fine.
Yeah.
But somebody's got to do it.
Yeah, that's right.
So this is where we are. And then, like, the historical perspective stuff, I look at going over Omaha Beach. Well, they do that in the middle of the day. Like, into fortified positions. Lost a huge amount of people. Like, no one's asking me to storm the beach. So I can turn up in my little helicopter with all my gear, looking really cool, the beard and guys covered in patches and spit and dip and all that other shit that goes on. Run out, do my job, get on the helicopter, go back so I can get back there so I only miss one meal timing. I can go back for the gym. I can watch my big screen TV. It's like, okay, this isn't that difficult.
Yeah.
I know everyone's got a different perspective on it.
No, it's
for
all
me,
relevant.
it's like, it wasn't that big a deal.
Because I know, like, I've spoken to a lot of the infantry guys that, and,
They were doing it much harder than us.
100% they were. They're out on, fobs that are in the middle of the desert in heat.
Yeah, and they got nothing.
And they got nothing. And they can't go on. Their hands are tied behind it. Because you guys at least could go out and hunt and do your job.
We were watching Free UFC. We had, like, the Army channel. We were at the point where we were taking milk to the Green Beans, which is a coffee shop, because there was no milk. So we would get milk for our coffee. So we would take our milk so we had milk. And then just leave it so the next 20 customers would have milk. Or whatever.
That's right.
So, I don't know. We were living it up. But that was... My perspective is also on the back of the 02 trip, where 60 of us are crammed into a hangar where we're eating MREs, and the only MRE after a while is black bean because no one likes it. So everyone avoids it, and all of a sudden that's what you've got for the next month.
Yeah.
Everyone's sick. Like, it is shit conditions. So now we go forward, and it's like, I've got all this cool shit. Like in 02, I was sewing up pouches onto my webbing because I didn't have a rig to take over. And now I've got all this really cool shit. People are buying their own stuff because they just want better stuff. And the issued stuff is okay. I bought some stuff because it was high speed. Looked really
Yeah,
cool.
of course.
And I liked it.
Yeah.
And it got stolen. That was really pissed me off by someone that shouldn't have been stolen. It got stolen when I left to go back. So it's like, there's nothing to complain about here. And I know the guys that turn up later, that's their understanding of what we're doing. So they have no perspective. So I kind of get that. But yeah, I don't know. Like, it's sort of, I look back on it and go, it's probably the most comfortable war I've ever... Actually, I'll call it conflict because it's not war. It's probably the most comfortable conflict I've seen, where we would fly out to the guys in the FOBs at the infantry bases, and they're hard-pressed for water. They got nothing. Like, we've got so much protein powder, so much Red Bull, that we're swapping it for whatever we want. Guys have got just barrels of dip. So we go out there literally with a bag on most occasions when we go out there for a visit or for whatever we're doing, and just giving them dip, Red Bulls. Like, we try and call ahead on time and say, okay, is there anything these guys need? And Angie get back like, no, they love it out here. Like, no, I don't know if they do love it. You're telling us that.
Yeah, that's right.
So we take stuff out for them.
Yeah.
But it's only a small amount. Like, they were doing it really hard. They were doing it literally the same as I did it in Timor. So I really understood what those conditions were like, where you don't have showers, clothes are starting to rot off your back. It's like, you're just living like shit. But you're enjoying it.
Yeah, that's right. And you had done, as you said, you'd done that in 99 when you were in Timor. So
well, we've got access to the American mail system, so guys are online shopping all the time. Like, you're being asked to go out and do something a little bit here and there, and okay, it could have been done better, but that's well above our pay grade, so I don't know. I don't get too worried about it.
You don't get in the weeds. I
sort of look back on it and go, we did everything we could to stack as many of the odds in our favour as we could. Yeah, we lost a few guys, but not that many. It was a very easy conflict for us to fight. But if we went up against a conventional, well-trained peer force, how would we go? I don't know whether we got away with a lot of stuff in Afghanistan, tactics-wise, that we probably wouldn't have. So we're doing clearances where you'd be 8 hours, you cleared 200 buildings for like a team of 6 or whatever, just going through this massive village clearing, 45-degree heat. Like, you're just kicking doors. Like, your drills are very sloppy at that point because you can get away with it. And it's really hot, and we shouldn't even be doing that work. That's infantry stuff that we've just been assigned. And the infantry guys are really keen to do it. It's just they're not allowed to do it. So they're pissed off at us. We're pissed off at other people. So we're getting away with a lot of really bad tactics where, I don't know, if we went into an environment now, and it's changed a lot with the use of unmanned vehicles and everything else that's going on. I don't even know whether there's a much of a role for conventional special operations anymore anyway. So, I don't know, it is what it is. Like, we weren't really being pushed too hard, I don't think. So, I don't know, I don't really look back, and I've got nothing to complain about.
Did you, in your 010 trip, did you look at it and go, is there a way out here? Like, is there an exit strategy? Or not at that point, you're just mission-focused, doing what you need to do?
For, like, larger strategy you're talking about?
Yeah, larger strategy.
Yeah, at some point I know we've got to leave.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that looks like. We'd laugh. We just burn this place down when we leave. But we knew we'd hand over a lot of stuff. Like, we're paying the local guy to be our mate. And he's going to be our mate while that money keeps flowing, even though he's the one that's blocking the road and just being belligerent. And he was the local police chief there at the time, who was a previous local Taliban warlord. We just greased his pockets, so he became the chief. So we knew that at some point we had to leave. We didn't know what it looked like for us, but at that point there was... I don't actually think the murmurs had started until I went back about 11 or 12. And then there was like, okay, at some point this has to end. So I went back for that one.
Was that a kinetic trip as well? Or?
Yeah, so that was another one. Partnering force was about 50-50 on that one. So the partnering force was getting really high. And they're turning up on the first turn. So initially we'd go in, then partnering forces, which is local forces, would turn up. And it'd be about maybe 2 of them for all of us. And we're only talking 18, 20 guys, like 24 to 30, depending on whereabouts in the rotation system we were. And then it starts growing and growing, and now it's 50-50. On that trip, there was, I think, a dozen of us, and there was a heap of them, but we changed partnering forces to a more trustworthy group.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
There were problems. We'd put in safeguards around it and minimise the risk to us. Clearly, the risk is always still there. Army found out the hard way on a couple of occasions. Yeah. But it's so difficult to assess that threat and try and mitigate everything anyway. So we kind of didn't have too many issues. On occasions, I think the partner forces may have been looking for opportunity. We just were really good at not presenting it to them. But towards the end, there's a lot of partnering forces, and even if they're not misaligned to you, or they're aligned with your cause, or everyone's got common goals out there, they still don't have the same level of training. So they're still, compromising the effectiveness and your survival. So you just didn't know whether you could trust their skills if it really came to it to keep you alive. So, but we were talking about winding down at that point, and that was about the point in my career where I'd been at this for 10 years now. We were looking at starting a young family or having children. I'd started doing a bit of study because I knew at some point this job ends for me, and I'm not just going to become another security dude rolling around in unmarked cars overseas or working mines in Africa or any of these other places people end up in. I actually wanted to go do something that I enjoyed. So I started doing my study at that point and got interested in trying to develop a better way to do human performance in the regiment, because it does have a really high injury rate. So that was probably the point for me where I'd started looking at, okay, well, how do I exit this job and then just move on, continuing to do things that I enjoy for the rest of my life and not end up with a busted marriage, being an alcoholic, being bitter, being overseas, or doing a job I didn't like because that's all I knew what to do.
Or having a split family with, with your kids. Because you would have seen that a lot.
They end up divorced. Yeah. A lot of them, like, I'm leaving to spend time with my family, and then they're working mines or they're doing security somewhere, and then they're busted up anyway. Like, well, you left this job for a job that's similar, that pays a lot more, but you're way more, so it didn't end well.
Yeah, that's right.
Not all, but there was a reasonable percentage of them that's the case.
So you talk about that moving into that academic space now, and you start at the start of the podcast. You're saying, I was a C, C average student. How hard was that, mate? Going, to do academics in your mid to late 20s, early 30s.
It actually wasn't that hard. I think I was early 30s at that point. I wasn't even the oldest person at university. One of the oldest, because I was doing sports science. So there was a few personal trainers that had gone on to do sports science. So I went back to university. Like, there's no uni bar. There's none of that's on my table. So I turn up, do lectures. I was still working anyway. So
because you're in the army, aren't you?
I had an agreement with work where I paid for all my study. They allocated the time I needed to go up there, unless there was something else that I needed to be doing. And so sometimes I'd miss lectures. Sometimes I'd drive up there after working all night and try not to fall asleep. But they were really good with giving me the time I needed. So it took some, not all, the load off. And the university had a program for athletes that they put me into. So I just explained roughly that I was away a lot with the military, and they know what the military is over there, so they didn't ask questions. They said, sweet, we can put you on this program, which means you're allowed to miss more classes than normal people. You don't get a free ride on your grades, but if you give them notice saying, oh, look, I'm not going to be around for this exam, then you can do it online. They're just a little bit more lenient with you. And because I was early 30s and not 18, they're like, fine, like, you're paying money, you're here to actually achieve something, not pass time and drink beer. So I wish I had been there to pass time and drink beer. So I missed the whole university opportunity. I was there too late. But by this time I've got kids anyway, so I'm not there for that. I'm there for the minimum time to get an understanding. So for me it wasn't that difficult. And I had context that I was putting all of the study into anyway, and I was taking it back to work. and trying to think, okay, what would this be useful for? What wouldn't this? And half your university degree is almost completely useless as a time filler. So I did that, passed out, and actually did really well on those courses, because by this time I'd developed a frontal lobe, like most men do once they get to mid-20s, so I could actually focus on something that was laborious and dedicate myself to it, rather than feel the need to just be running outside chasing squirrels. So I got through that, did pretty well, and then went on to do my Masters in Strength and Conditioning, which was the goal of it, to then bring back better information to try and help inform what would a better human performance program look like as far as physiology, or the human athletic performance side of things. And that kind of was co-founded with Harry Moffat, who was running the program and looking after the psychological pillar, pretty much all the other pillars really. So he was looking after that side of things, and we kind of got it to a point where it was when we left. So it was almost mature, and then Army kind of took it and did what they wanted with it.
And go back and listen to Moff's episode 49, and I've just done part 2 with him, actually, with his 4th pillar with his book. So that's about to come out. So, go back and listen to Moff's episode. And as I mentioned, when Sean McCarthy was killed, Moff was the driver. And I mentioned Weeksy as well. Weeksy was sitting in the passenger seat. So go back and listen to both their episodes. And that, that Dan in itself, where Moff, talks about that, where he often talked about that there was always opportunities for your officers to go to university and transition out, but there was never anything for you guys, the non-commissioned NCOs and other ranks, and that it's really great that he, and along with you, could start to put things in place for, well, you got to have a plan after the military. Like, what is your plan going forward? So, and that is that now. It's still in the Army, or
it is. I had nothing to do with the education stream, so that was all Moff. I'm not going to take any of his credit away for that. I was focused on my things, and he was off doing that other stuff that he was keen on doing. So I was looking more at the injury side of things. So how do we stop guys getting injured so that they're not being pushed out, and how do we get them to be able to have a fulfilling career? You're always going to have wear and tear. Like, there's no way you're going to get through a job that's that physically demanding
100%.
Without the loads that you're carrying and not have some level of degeneration. And everyone has it. Like, everyone that's in that place for 15 to 20 years.
Knees, back, shoulders.
Like, they all qualify for disability. Like, I think my car, I could get a disability sticker if I wanted, but I would get everything thrown at me if I parked that at the shopping centre and walked out of it. So just the level of degeneration you have. So most guys are still moderately functional. Most of them are in discomfort or painkillers, whiskey and painkillers.
Well, you're looking pretty good, mate, still.
Yeah, that doesn't mean I'm pain free.
Yeah, of course.
I spend a lot of time managing how I train. And at the moment I'm carrying a couple of injuries that are impacting my training. So I was looking at that, because we had guys who, like 40, 45, they got young families, and they come into work and they would talk about how their back was in so much pain they couldn't lift their kid that morning. Like, their kid wants to be lifted up, and it's a young kid, so it doesn't understand osteoarthritis all through your back and that sort of shit. It just knows Daddy doesn't want to pick him up. Why doesn't Daddy love me enough to pick me up? So this creates a huge amount of internal turmoil for people, is that, they want to be a caring father, but they physically do not have the capacity to do it. So it was like, all right, well, why are we asking people to get to a point where that's a problem? Like, we should be looking after people better. So I was really interested in, okay, how do we better prepare people for the demands of the job, reduce the amount of injuries, but because a lot of the injuries were coming from overtraining. So it's a completely preventable cause when they're injuries that are coming out of the gym, and it's still the case in the military. Last time I checked, was that the highest cause, or the largest injury mechanism, is actually formal training. So it's like, all right, well, let's clean that up. That's something we can control. Clean that up, and I think we had about an 80% injury reduction in gym injuries, and the workplace injuries followed, because total load is coming down, or allostatic load, as you sort of look at it. So total stress volumes dropped. So it sort of looked at that, and that's what I was more interested in, was longevity. Not really so much of making, athletic beasts that are going to outperform everybody, because you just can't do it in that environment. Like, you can get pretty good athletically, but just the routine you have is not really conducive for it. So I was just looking at, okay, how do we do better for this?
And in saying that, is that more so looking at it, Dan, to prolong careers in the regiment as well? Not just post, like, picking up your kids, and it's prolonging that career of an operator too. Yeah,
and even when you look at the data around that from the regular army, like there's the initial suicide report that came out, I'm going to say 2010 to 12, some point there. It actually had data in it. And when you sift through the data, the leading cause of suicide, and it's multifactorial, there's always causes, so you have to be careful singling things out. They give you an indication, not causation. And I think people use causation way too regularly. But when you have a look at it, the highest rate per 100,000 came from people that had been medically discharged within a year involuntarily. When you look at the reason for involuntary medical discharge, the leading cause, and it's like 30 to 40%, so it's not 80% or anything like that, but there's a whole heap of causes, was formal PT. So you can't say, you're breaking people here and that's causing suicides here. There's dots there, like it's an association that's there. These are all preventable. So if you prevented this, how many people wouldn't get kicked out? How many people wouldn't be able to do something else, struggle with that transition or leaving early and not get themselves into a place they can't get out of? Because I think there's a pathway to suicide. It's not just a simple thing. I think people get on that pathway and it's really hard for them to get off. I don't know. It's not something that I study in maths, so I won't go too deep into it. There's, like I said, there's always different reasons. Helplessness seems to be a point once people get to helplessness that it's really difficult for them.
That's right.
But guys in the regiment, same thing, because you've got that beret, you've got really big belonging. It's almost a part of you, and I'm not going to use the word identity deliberately because I've got my own thoughts on the fact that identity is self-serving for status, not for the individual. So I think people could look at that very differently. And I think it's one of the reasons why I left and had no real issues. I wasn't too concerned because I never took the identity on. It was a job. It wasn't me. It was something I did, and it was really self-serving for a number of things. But I had to understand where it was self-serving, where I was sacrificing on behalf of other people for their time and their commitment to help me do this really self-indulgent job, and where I needed to separate from certain things to maintain that kind of mental clarity around who I was, not who I was when I was in the uniform.
But I think that's a healthy way to look at it too.
Yeah, I don't really do identity. I really like the stuff that's written from Buddhism and those sort of things, where it's just, I'm cruising through life and I wear a heap of different hats and for a different amount of time.
That's right.
And I was, like, even if I look at the combat side of things, so all up my time in Afghanistan, I think, was 3 and a bit years, or 3 to 4 years, somewhere like that. So far, that's probably 8% of my life. Like, why would I hang my hat on 8% of my life? Like, I was in primary school longer than I was in Afghanistan, so why wouldn't I walk around talking about how I was a primary school student? Extreme analogy. But for me, it's just something that I did. It was really cool, very unique. A heap of things came out of it. Yeah, it's difficult, but I don't have an issue with challenge. So I kind of separated from that. But then going back to the injury side of things, some of those guys really have a deep identity or a deep belonging or connection to the job that they're doing, whether it's healthy or not. I'm not going to talk about it.
No, of course.
But if they go, and then a lot of times once your back or your knees are gone or your shoulders, you're on the clock. Like, you've got a limited career in there. So if we could reduce the amount of people getting injured earlier and increase their career longevity, then we're going to potentially reduce some of those impacts of them being forced out before their time. And most of the guys I've seen who had issues, they were forced out before their time. Or they thought they wanted to go, they just weren't ready. Or they're going for the wrong reason because they're hurt or angry or something like that. So there's a heap of different second and third order effects from a good program, and that was just some of them. So it wasn't so much athletic, it was more for health, really.
Yeah, and it's like you going down that science path. Like, I can understand. It's interesting. Like, it's interesting, studying the cases and seeing, the evidence that's put in front of you to go, oh, okay, yes, we can see that there was an absolute, genuine reason that guys were, their careers were being cut short because, as you said, overtraining, and that's the science, the evidence. It's there. You can see it.
And you're asking for really driven people who are going to, a lot of them going to push. And I always make the joke that 49% of every organisation is below average. So there's still a disproportionately large number of people there, I feel, that aren't doing any work, who should be doing more work. But you've still got a good percentage there who are pushing really hard, and they're the ones that are getting hurt.
So you then, so you complete your masters, and then so the mate rewarding, and then but you're not finished with your study. You're still.
I found the physical side of things to not be challenging enough. So I was looking at selection with some of the physiological metrics, and there wasn't really many linkages between why people would get to the end of selection. And I knew at the time it was more motivational, more mental, those sort of things. But, you know, the bigger you are, the fitter you are. So aerobic capacity is one, because the more energy you have, the more efficient you are in activities, the faster you recover. The more muscle mass you have, the slower you degrade, the easier it is to lift things, the more strength and endurance you have, the less energy you're burning each time you lift something and carry it. Like lower body strength, then it's easier to lift packs, walk around. Again, it all comes down to energy. It's an energy equation. The more efficient you are in activity, the faster you recover, the easier you do it. But that doesn't mean you get to the end, because I've seen some of the fizz people leave day 3, and then you see people who turn up and literally you laugh and you go, this is going to be a train wreck for this dude. I can't wait to watch it. And the dude plows through, gets all the way to the end. Doesn't excel at things. He's not a jet. He's just motivated, and he's done the work required to get himself to that physical level he can do it. So it didn't really answer too many questions, except that high aerobic capacity, the more lower body strength you have, the more muscle mass you have, and total body mass, they make it easier. But total body mass was probably the more significant one I studied over a couple of years, and I know there's been other studies that looked at a whole bunch of other things, but that just comes down to relative load of the pack, which when you look at the gender differences, you've just got smaller human beings, because they don't generally grow 6'3", and 6 foot is literally the average size of a lot of guys in the regiment. Like there's like 88 kilos, 6 foot is the average. So anyone over that is kind of above average, but anyone under that is a below average size human. So they're all massive humans. So everywhere you go, you look like you're a big rugby team. But if you've got a 5'5", 5'8" female who weighs 65, 70 kilos, that's a big difference. And then you've got the reproductive organs, which reduce the amount of muscle mass that they carry on that frame, so it becomes a size thing, which then becomes an energy thing, because they're spending so much more energy for every activity they're doing. Spending more energy, recovering less, at some point they're going to degrade faster. So, like, it's not complex, complicated, but not complex.
Yeah.
The way I sort of looked at it. So I wasn't too, I thought, okay, from here it's just a sets reps programming thing. And, anyone can do that really with enough knowledge. And understanding. Like, there's a lot of people out there that they own fitness, and this is how you do it, and cool, I never bought into owning it. It's like, I'll just find what's effective, what's not. And there's heaps of different ways to go about it. So I kind of then moved into the cognitive space, looking at cognition, interested in neuroscience. I started looking at perception of effort and psychobiological model, which looks at the interplay between cognition and physiology, looking at how the brain interacts with the body to create that ability to continue to work when you're under pain, fatigue, those sort of things. So I looked at that. And then I kind of pivoted from the back of that into the PhD. And at this point, I'd left the military.
Yeah, so
you probably want to circle back on
that. So we'll just circle back to, so you finish your time in Afghanistan, you start doing, so you 11, 12 was your last trip into Afghanistan?
Last
kinetic.
Last deployment like that,
under
Slipper.
Yeah, under Slipper, and then, so you do a couple of other deployments post that?
So a couple of different ones. Between 2 to 6 weeks, some of them, they are what they are.
Yeah, and then, so in 2019, mate, you, after 22 years of service, you discharged from the Army, and most veterans and first responders I've spoken to on the potty, they struggle with transition, but you were going down your PhD path, so how was your transition back into, being a civilian?
Yeah, I don't think I ever was not a civilian. I've probably struggled a little bit in the regular army, and that was one of my gripes, was that I didn't want to be indoctrinated. I didn't want to camp my kids up in the backyard and build forts and shit. I kind of like the idea that it was a job. It is a really intensive job, and it requires a really high level of professionalism, so it's more than a standard job. But you still come home from it. Ideally, you still come home from it each day. So I never lived in the patch, which is where all the married people live. I always lived... Once I bought a house, it was like 10 k's away and then 20 k's away. So I'd go home every day and this sort of thing. I had a life outside of work. No, it wasn't too intensive, but I kind of enjoyed doing nothing. My wife started her own business, so that took a lot of focus away from work anyway. So that's where we invested our time outside of what I was doing for my money. So when I left, The transition into civilian life wasn't too difficult. So I left because I got offered a job that I was interested in, which was where I came to Queensland for a job in the Queensland Reds in their high performance program as the assistant strength and conditioning coach. I was always interested in sport, and there was knowledge in there that I didn't have. Working where I was in the military was a very sheltered workshop, so it was just the people that I could get around me or go out and see, or the sort of virtual mentoring that I was able to get was what I was using for development. But this was an opportunity to embed or sort of get into a program and then sort of being mentored by people that have been in it for ages, just to understand all the things that I didn't know. So I went there for about 2 years, of 18 months, 2 years. It was a tough place to work. The environment or the culture wasn't great when I was there for various reasons. So I didn't really love it. They were losing a lot, so there's a lot of pressure, especially when you're at the bottom. So everyone knows shit runs downhill, and I was at the bottom of the hill. So I was constantly defending decisions. The guy I worked for, he ended up getting sacked, I think, 3 months in, and his replacement was waiting in the car park for him. So I was like, I don't know if there's a big future in this. It's a merry-go-round, so in sport you move around a lot. There's only a couple of teams in Queensland. If and when I lost the contract at the Reds, because at some point you go, a new coach comes in, whether you're doing a good job or not, he brings his guys, and that's fair because they're familiar, and it's more about the team, not about individuals when it comes to high performance. Is that doesn't matter whether you're a really good high performer, you go into a new team, you perform like an amateur in a lot of cases because you're just not familiar with people. So if it was me and I was a coach, I would bring my own team too. They're trusted, they've done a good job, you know how they work. It's that simple. So, you know, you're season to season. Everyone's on 1 to 2 year contract. So it was interesting. I did enjoy sport, and I would happily go back into sport for the right job. I just don't know whether I would seriously do it or not. It would be enjoyable, but I don't think it's a future for me. So I did time there. My wife got a job in Queensland, so I decided to take a scholarship that I've been offered. So on the back of my Masters, I qualified for research scholarship in excellence through the university. So that came with a little bit of living allowance. All the research is paid for. So I took that, and then that allowed me to stay at home and look after the kids while she went and did her job, which required some shift work. So that I went and became the stable base at home, and she went and did stuff that she enjoyed. So that was kind of the transition. So I went from literally being SAS Patrol Commander to initially I was filling water bottles at the Reds between seasons. The off season, I was like, this is great. I can fill water bottles. You know, this colour's water, this colour's Powerade. Simple. So I did that there, and then I was literally unemployed, just at home every day. A huge wage cut. So I took a huge cut in my salary, which I knew was going to happen, so it wasn't that big an issue. And I know a lot of people really struggle with that. But I'd set things up beforehand to mitigate the impact of that. But there was still a really big impact from a couple of years of study, which created a fairly decent hole for us to dig ourselves out of. But I'd put things in place because I knew that was always going to be clunky. Being at home on your own after being in such intensive environments took a little bit of getting used to. In a lot of ways, I did enjoy the peace and quiet and just chilling, doing my own thing and being left alone. Other times, there's no one around. I didn't even have a dog. Like, the kids would go to school, and then it's just me underneath our house, and we're in a very old rental at that point. So I'm underneath in like a semi-basement underground that's just enclosed. On my computer, typing away, reading research, fighting with ethics committees, all these cool things that you go through when you're doing a PhD. But I just maintained my focus. I knew at some point that ends. And I knew transitioning was always... No one transitions that well. But I sort of looked at it as nobody... or very rarely do people stay in the same job for really extended periods of time. So everyone in the community is going through transitions at some point. Like, the average job or time in employment now, I think, is 2 to 3 years. So people are transitioning really regularly. So I thought, why is it a problem for military people? And I get it, it's an intensive job. And police, anyone,
Fire,
even
military.
sport has the same issue. People will play really high level sport and they go to nothing. So they have really big problems there as well. And I think it's just about keeping yourself active. Like, I sort of looked at it in a lot of ways. I see similarity between working dogs and people in really high demanding teams. I'm really careful about using high performance because I don't know that they are high performing. I think they're asked high performance type jobs, but when you look in there, there's a lot of low performance behaviours going on. There's a lot of things to be able to deal with the demands and the pressure. So they're very demanding. So people in those roles are always active. They're really demanding, like a working dog. But then when you give them nothing to do, pretty quickly they get really bored and they start tearing up your backyard. They become really destructive. So I kind of looked at it like that. to not become destructive, just keep myself busy.
So then you start your PhD, mate, and and in that time, we should say when you transitioned out, COVID hits as well. So throw in a global pandemic, which
that changed my PhD a lot. So all my face-to-face research was being done back in Perth because the PhD was still with the military. So I had to change that a little bit and use travel windows, which I managed to do, and then I was able to leverage the military in Brisbane, who are really helpful in supplying research participants for something that I wanted to do. So I was looking at a lot of sort of cognitive, psychological type things. So I was well outside my exercise and science lane. But there's a process to get there, what I was looking at. So I was looking heavily at the coaching science, the psychology, and then a lot of the cognitive science around how training transfers, or the impact of pressure, and then how you develop training that has high transfer to essentially combat environments.
So throw in that pandemic, that throws a spanner in the works for you, and you finally get your PhD submission in, and then you actually, was it last year, and you went to Sydney and got your graduation?
So you put your thesis in, then it comes back 4 to 6 months later, or 3 to, I don't know, a little while. I know, I just enjoyed the space from having nothing to do, and that's really relieving, not having something hanging over your head, because the date for your submission is always there, and you always got to keep moving forward. And that's something that I've learned over time, is like taking on these really ambitious, or taking on challenges that are worthwhile, that cause you a little bit of, I'll say stress. I hate the word stress because it's just so overused, but it just creates that little bit of excitement around the challenge, makes you a little bit scared or uncomfortable about what you're doing, because there's a sweet spot for performance which requires an element of that, and it's different for everybody based on where they are. But this idea that remove stress, people perform, is bullshit. Like, you need, the term they're starting to use now is sus stress. So it's almost like an inverted bell curve, and a lot of people may have seen the Yerkes-Dodson curve, where they talk about the sweet spot for performance, or the relationship between arousal and performance. No idea why they use the term arousal, but that's what it is. It's the same thing for learning as well. It's essentially, as you're learning, you need that sweet spot. So you need a little bit of the right amount of pressure. The wrong pressure can be really negative for you as well, but that area where there's not enough, that's sus stress, because you're just not interested in what you're doing. So you're just not focused. There's no attention on what you're doing.
Well, you look at it when you're in Afghanistan. That was,
there's plenty of pressure there.
Yeah, there's pressure, there's stress, there's you're putting your life on the line. There's that. So, as you say, there's never, you can't, like, if you don't have that. Yeah. And I know it as a fly fighter, that when you're going into the heat of battle, it is stressful. It is, you're making life and death decisions around your crew, around, and you're making your own life and death. So you do need stress. Stress is good. Like, where people, that's, you're right. I've noticed that a lot now, that people have said, "Oh, you gotta stress is bad." Well, we've all got stress. It's
the priming of it's really important as well, and that's something that has come out from the work I've been doing around the cognitive side of stuff in the preparation space, because a part of what people call situational awareness, which again, situational awareness is a specific scientific definition. It gets used, and the way people are using it isn't wrong. Like, I'm not going to start saying
no,
everyone's wrong about
you
don't understand situational awareness, because they'll just become one of those academics I hate. But it's a definition within the research, and there's components of it. But then there's a component pre-situation awareness, which is anticipation, which is the priming for what you expect to see, or you anticipate to see, and that changes the whole way you see and perceive things within the environment. So telling people, "Oh, stress is bad," you're literally setting them up to respond negatively to stress, because there's this constant interplay between receiving signals from your body and trying to interpret them through interoception, and then receiving signals from the environment, which is all the stimulus cues, whatever term people like to use for it. And again, this stuff's all, it's not interchangeable so much, but it's used interchangeably all the time. So I don't get wrapped up on the terms. But whatever term you use for it, go for it.
That's right.
That's your term. If you understand it, is the important thing.
That's right.
So the information from the environment, which either then allows you to conduct task-related behaviour, because you're seeing task-related information, or goal-related information, or threat related, or salience, which is a distraction, and now you're focused on that and you're missing the information you need. Like in a firefighting perspective, there's going to be certain behaviours of a fire that you need to be able to visually attend to and understand what they are, so you can see what's going on. If you're looking at someone yelling because their car's too close to the fire, or you smash the window to put your hose on, I don't even know if you do that anymore.
No,
you should.
Yeah.
That's why I'm not engaged in firefighting. But if they're yelling about something that's completely unrelated to distraction and your focus is over there, you miss the really important stuff.
That's
and
right.
in a minute, that could have evolved into something that now is a problem.
That's
so
right.
It's that type of thing. And you see it a lot. Most of the research I looked at was policing. And policing, it's really big because people train, and it's really difficult to train people. It's an experiential thing that they get through interacting with real life people. Is that it's really difficult to train people to understand the right cues, see the right cues, and perceive or perceive what they are, so that they can then predict what is likely to happen. Because we work on predictions, and this is all the stuff that I was sort of looking at. So it's all integral to it. But back to the stress piece. The stress is a capacity that you have to build. So if you think about it, aerobic capacity. Say I ask somebody to run 5Ks, but they've only ever run 2Ks. They're going to struggle with 5Ks. Somebody who's run 10Ks doesn't care about 5. It's easy. I can build someone to 5Ks. I can build them 10Ks.
Yep.
You can build them in... It's a really long... People can achieve way more than what they think.
Well, I did it this year, mate. I never run the City to Surf, and I ran 14K.
Yeah, it's a process.
It is.
You follow the process, and there's heaps of ways to do it. This is the thing. But it all involves an exposure to that stress in appropriate manner that is progressively loaded with a period of space to allow adaptation. So a capacity to stress works on a very, very similar thing. And for anyone that is interested in it, hormesis is the term that they use when it comes to things like vaccines, those sort of things. Like, ironically, if you look at, and this is a little bit off topic, but it's the same principle, information coming back, and I'll caveat that with it's the information coming back, like I haven't seen it, from the Chernobyl site, is that a lot of the animals there have actually evolved because of microdosing of, potentially because of the microdose of the fallout, or, no, I'm losing words, probably early stage dementia kicking in from too many blasts. And I'm not going to talk, that's the only comment I'm going to make about blast injury.
Yeah.
It comes up a lot in my neuroscience research I look at now, specifically when I look at that type of thing.
Yeah.
But I don't know enough, and I'd be just creating more issues if I spoke to it. There's people out there doing some really good work, so I'm certainly not going to make it worse by giving half-assed commentary, is let's just say that there's not an issue of too many people, or not enough people giving half-assed commentary.
That's right.
So, like, that's hormesis in play. So it's an exposure to a low level of stress, like an inoculation sort of thing. And that's where stress inoculation, and I use inoculation as opposed to vaccination, because vaccination is you're vaccinated against, inoculation is a small dose that's continued on.
Yep.
So that's how you get people to that capacity, because if they don't have the capacity to deal with the level of threat, the risk is that the salient information and the specific neural circuitry that's designed for this, they over-focus on the threat-based or salience-based information. They miss the really important stuff, and that's where you see people underperform. That's where you see people do either nothing, because the uncertainty and the situation, they can't understand it enough to know what to do, so they're caught in that kind of...
Fight, freeze, or...
Yeah, like it presents as a freeze response, but I don't know whether it's specifically a freeze response. Because there's still a component known as orienting, where you're still trying to get more information in. Like, you're not really actively doing anything, but you're trying to work, okay, what does this mean? What can I do? And if there's too much information coming in... Information overload, and they're not filtering it effectively as what's important, then there could just be a filtering problem. Could be like when your computer's just spinning. And the computer's a really shitty analogy for the brain. But it pops up as an easy one.
It's an easy one.
They're in that space. They're trying to work out, okay, what do I actually need to look at? And that's where, if you give someone a task that they understand immediately, you can get them to go into action, because, sweet, now I know to do that. And that's kind of one of the things that drove me into the research. Was I was seeing, and it happened to me, first time you're in a gunfight, there's a lot of information. You're trying to work, okay, what do I actually do here? Where's that coming from? You're fighting to work out what you need to filter. And you're just 2 steps behind everybody else. You're a couple steps behind, because they already know what they need to be looking at. And then you get a bit of experience, and laughingly you'd say, 100, 200 gunfights later, and without actually being a dickhead about it, and they're not big gun fights. You're being shot at, let's say. So, you know, let's say 24 times down the road you've been shot at. Next rotation you come back, new guy there, never been shot at, gets shot at, and you can just see that little bit of delay in what's going on as they're just kind of bringing themselves into speed. So it's really difficult to bridge the gap from training to being potentially about to be killed, and you're never going to get that in training. Each person has to reconcile that gap themselves. Some people do it, some people don't. Some people turn up and it's really quick. You're like, wow, that's impressive. That guy was ready to go when he hit the ground. Other people, it just doesn't happen. You're like, yeah, maybe this isn't the job for you. Sort of thing. So, and I did see some early things which were quite interesting, like a dog ran between me and another guy who was an awesome operator, like a far better operator than me. It was just really early time in his trip. I'd gone into a hut, this dog launched at me, and they're like bears. Well, it was that close, it felt like a bear.
Yeah. I've heard that those dogs are like wolves over there. Like,
yeah. Like, by that time, it could have been a poodle. It was that close. I've seen the teeth. It felt like a bear. It's like every shark's a great white.
Yeah, that's right.
Never report Moresby. So I'd fired a couple of shots because it was coming at me. I'd stuck my head into its little outhouse home just to see what was in there because it's full of hay and shit, part of the clearance. And it came at me and I'd sort of come back, and your instinct is to fight. Like, it's a pre-conscious decision. Like, this whole idea of decision making in those situations, I think, is based on false understanding of how the brain works. So a couple of shots go off from me, and that's survival. The part of my brain that's responsible for survival said, okay, we need to avoid getting bitten. What can we do? I've got a rifle in my hand, so we're just going to use that. It's pretty effective. So as I'm coming back, I'd sort of stopped because the dog started going between us. So I'd picked him up. The brain's like, all right, there's a threat here now. If we continue to fire, it does the balance of, okay, the dog's continuing straight, so it's no longer a threat coming at me. He's there, you know, this is the most appropriate. Inhibition now is the most appropriate response. Then there's a couple hits or a couple rounds land in between my legs as he's tracked the dog going past. And I sort of looked up at him, a bit surprised. And I could see it in his eyes straight away, the realisation that he'd just fired right next to me, or at me, essentially at me, or at this dog without realising I was there. Yeah. And he initially hadn't even seen me. It took that split second for the brain to allow the information of me standing there to come through that filter, because the threat of the dog was being prioritised so much more. And I was like, that's really interesting.
So it's like tunnel vision in that sort of sense.
Tunnel vision is how people explain it, But there's actual mechanisms for it. And there's nothing wrong with the term tunnel vision, because essentially it's just a cognitive filtering process where you're really congested or divergent on the way that you're seeing things and you're thinking, whereas you want to be more convergent, where you want to be more divergent, where you're actually seeing more bigger, and you're understanding what's going on. And that's where you come up with solutions, because that's what creativity takes. You need to be in the right zone, because a lot of times in complexity or chaos, you actually have to be a little bit creative in solving a never before seen problem with a solution you've never before tried. Like, you've done components of it, but now you've got to make different shaped objects fit into different shaped holes somehow, and that takes a bit of creativity. Where if you're overcome with the pressure of it, or your training's just been sub-adequate, you don't have those experiential or those experiences in your memory to draw from to now make, or to be creative. Like, creativity takes a baseline in most cases.
And I know what you're saying, because when I first started as a firer, I did have that, there's a fire, I'll go straight for that. Yeah. I didn't see the power lines, I didn't see the cliff. And I had this discussion yesterday with the police veteran, the same thing. He said, but as you know, when you got into more gunfights, and then that, as you're saying, you actually start to open your and go, okay, I can see that, I can see this, I can say, that's
and you've
right.
Got a whole heap of experiences to draw from. You know what I mean? So you can go, okay, this picture looks similar to that picture I seen 10 years ago. Okay, because the brain, the best research at the moment shows the brain works on predictions. It's not an information processing system where information comes in, we understand what it means, we understand what we can do. It's more prediction. Is that I see this, and even what and how I see something is based on what I anticipate to see. So going back to the anticipation is like, it's a prediction of what I think is going to be there. When there's prediction error, my brain updates to understand, okay, I haven't seen this before, what's this? So you go into a little bit of a orienting thing, or a little bit of a fact-finding or sense-making where, okay, now I've got to work out what that is. But when you see something and you think, that's exactly the same as I seen last time, whether it is or it isn't, and it's so easy for us to be fooled with information, is that, and we're often usually not even aware of it, is that we're predicting, okay, if that's that, this is the behaviour. So often you'll see and this is kind of going back to the research, is a lot of the way people respond is considered inappropriate, but it's appropriate to the way they perceived it and the prediction they had. So you can only respond to the way you've perceived that information. So it becomes really interesting. And even then when you go, okay, how do you prepare people for it? Now, the best research I've seen shows that a really big range of diverse experiences gives them a really good range of options from memory to draw upon or reflect against for the situation that they're in. So rather than this is how you do it, I'll show you, you show me, tick, where now they're just going to go for that response regardless of what's in front of them. Like you're just giving them a hammer and send them out into the wild to treat everything as a nail.
That's right.
So it's like, all right, well, but it's time and resource intensive and it's difficult.
So this is the sort of work that you're doing now. So you've got your PhD and now you're going into that. You've started another degree, which I take my hat off to.
Yeah,
mate.
that was passing time. So I did post PhD. I went and worked with the Queensland Police Service as one of their frontline instructors. Policing came up so much that I was intrigued to understand it more. So I was trying to understand policing from the context of special operations, which is not the best place to come at it from. You got to be really open-minded to it. And so I went and thought, okay, I'm going to find out more about policing because there's a lot of stuff I don't understand about policing that I'm trying to use my knowledge from this domain into this domain. And it's just not going to work. So, and I was intrigued. So I went along and I did all their training to be a frontline instructor. And you kind of go through their package almost as a recruit, just you're not assessed on any of the policing stuff. So I went and did did all their firearms training, their policing skills like hand-to-hand, arrest techniques, that sort of stuff. And it was really cool. I kind of enjoyed that. I was just playing around for 3 months, really, for me. So just learning new stuff. But it gave me an understanding, okay, this is what they're exposed to, this is how long they're exposed to it, those sort of things. And some of their instructors were really good. Some of them not so much, but it's the same, you get a mixed bag. But the instructor side of things is really important to your outcome. And then I went along, did some in-service for a while, and then got into the recruit training program and helped with the recruit training. And then I was fortunate enough, and there was a review going on post some of the issues they'd been having in policing or some specific incidents, where they were reviewing their recruit training program, looking at how it could be better. So I was actually brought in and spent a bit of time within their curriculums team looking at what research is out there as far as best training methodologies and what a new training program would look like, and developed them sort of an evidence-informed guide to then create the training from, which allowed me to really go through a lot of research and try and get a really good understanding of what we're currently doing, what flaws are in there, where we could be better, and what the research sort of suggests could be better. And interviewed a number of academics who really knowledgeable and have done a heap of research around sort of the psychology, coaching science, different methods of motor skill acquisition, this sort of thing. So it was really good in advancing a lot of my knowledge as to, okay, well, what would a really good training program look like? And now they've got that will slowly start to evolve and be built and take place. So,
yeah, right.
Yeah.
So you did that, and then now you've gone back to uni again. So
yeah,
you're sucker for punishment. Yeah.
I ended up leaving the QPS. So from there, I took a short-term role helping develop a strategic command program, which was more looking at a lot of the human behaviour, human performance side of things. So information processing under pressure, how you maintain teams in really high-pressure situations. And a lot of it was designed or focused around the disaster management, critical incident response type of thing. So it was designed for that sort of executive level or senior executive level. So I had involvement in development of that and the delivery. Once that sort of was done, so I was around to see the end of that, they wanted me to go back to the position or my substantive position, but I'd moved house, kids had started high school, I had family commitments that didn't fit in with the time commitments there. It's a structure down there, so there's no flexibility. I completely understood that, so I was really left with the only other option of, again, leaving a job to look after family, which I'm never hesitant to do. So I chilled for a little bit, now doing some neuroscience to pass some time, and I'm enjoying the learning. It's filling a lot of gaps around, especially around the sort of stimulus response or the kind of very early stage of behavioural response to information. So a lot of it's really pre-conscious, and been looking at some really interesting stuff around the EEG side of things with the units that I'm doing, and some behaviour stuff just not loving the academic assessment process. It's kind of a struggle for me.
Yeah.
Because there's so much other things that I'd like to be doing, want to be doing, and like we're on school holiday break now, so it's really hard to find time to focus on that.
Yeah.
But I'll do what I need to do for that side of things. But the increasing the knowledge around the gaps I had in my previous understanding is only going to benefit anything I do.
Of
from
course.
this point. So.
Yeah, definitely. And I've got a couple final questions, mate, before we wrap it up. And just, wow, like, as I said, it's so hard to capture all of your careers in such a short, like 22 years. How do you compress that down to 2 to 3 hours? It's very hard. But I've got a couple of final questions to you, mate. And knowing what you know now and all that you've been through, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self, and would he listen?
I don't know if he would or not, to be honest. I probably would. I had some really good mentors back then, so I was definitely open to listening. And that's probably what kept me on the right path, was getting around the right people at those really impressionable years of my early 20s. Because I think the average age for doing selection is that sort of 25 to 28 to 30 type of thing. So I was definitely on the underside of that. So I think most likely, whether I would listen to myself or not, like if I went back in a time machine, I'd probably be interested in what I did wrong and then not do that. But who knows, whether that turns out better or not. But as far as the advice goes, I don't know. Like, I've been asked this question a few times. I've never really been kind of really confident in the answer. I honestly don't know. I guess the only thing that I probably would have done more of was probably be more courageous in taking risks or opportunity when it wasn't as important. Like, when I'm being shot at, maybe not be super courageous then. Maybe, a little bit of moderation or being slightly conservative is not a bad thing, because no one likes people that are completely fearless. They're just not good to have around. But probably just be a little bit more courageous in taking opportunities. I think I've missed opportunities that presented to me during the years that I probably could have attacked a little bit more. But again, would that mean that I would be in a worse position or a better position? I honestly don't know. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Like you like, I ask that question a lot, and a lot of people say, probably wouldn't listen, but like you're saying, the opportunity's missed, but also the fear of what others would think. If that's a big one too. Like, because you think about how many people have had a great idea, said it to someone, and then they've shot it down, so they go, "Oh, okay, well, I won't do it."
I guess that's probably a valid one. When I was younger, I was definitely probably more concerned about what people thought. I guess a lot of that goes back to early childhood. And I think most of the things that are your concern in your 20s to 30s are early childhood related. And this is a real concern for me now, is the amount of people that are forced into the workplace and their kids are forced into daycare, firstly because of the risks that are in there. But daycare is literally, to me, is like the solar bait scheme for children, is that it's just cheap providers on government subsidies doing fuck knows what. So what do those kids look like in 20 years? And I certainly there's no parental blame or anything like that. I understand how difficult it is.
Whoa.
Like, I was in a position where affordability was based on single income families. Now it's not. Like, no one's going to survive on a single income family.
Oh, not a chance.
So
cost of living's through the roof.
I completely understand that. So we're in this really shitty situation, which I think the outcomes for society aren't great. But again, the solution is not easy. Like,
no,
none of these solutions. The only way out is through, and through is really uncomfortable. But for me, it's a thing. So a lot of my issues that I've slowly reconciled over the years, and they obviously weren't too bad because I'm not a drug addict.
Of course.
Stayed out of prison, those sort of things, would be around, I think, a lot to do with my relationship with my old man and his portrayal of toughness, because he came from an environment, his old man was an abusive alcoholic, not violent physically, but just come home drunk, throw shit around, be a dickhead, that sort of thing. So he grew up in that type of environment, which unfortunately I think was far too common back then. Yeah. A lot of people go to the pub after work, get drunk, come home, act like a fucking idiot.
Yeah.
And I'd like to think we've moved on mostly, but I don't know. There's data out there that says maybe not as much as we could have. No. I mean, but again, there's so many pressures out there. So these things are really complex, multifactorial, and for me, behaviour emerges. It's not something that you are or you aren't. There's all these inputs going into it. And
of course.
You are where you are at that point in time. Whether it's right or wrong, I'm not going to... That's a different discussion, but there's factors that
of course
could be addressed to reduce some of these
environment's
things.
Everything, isn't it? Yeah,
100%. So, yeah, I think a lot of that came from my old man. So I was definitely more worried about what people thought, and that probably came from judgment. Or even school. Like, school's really judgmental. Like, everything you do wrong, you get shamed.
Of course.
And that sort of thing. And if you're not that engaged or you're not that good at school, then, kids don't run around anymore, so where's the outlet to prove that you have some value? So a lot of it came from that. But then I kind of reconciled that, and honestly now I couldn't really be too fucked what people thought. Like, it's still there because there's still that primitive need to belong.
Yeah.
So if you're judged negatively, less chance of belonging, more chance of being out on the savannah on your own. Now you're part of the food chain. I get the primitive side of things, but now it's like, well, the most people that judge me essentially behind me.
Of course.
Like, you very rarely get judged, and this is something that I heard David Goggins talk about. This isn't from me, and I've heard it from other people, is that very rarely do you get judged by people that are above you or in front of you type of thing.
Of course.
Like, they're more likely to reach back or shine the light to show you the path.
Yeah, absolutely.
If people are judging you, it's like, okay, what are they pissed off about? So when people give me shit on social media or fire at me or get really angry, it's like, okay, you just got angry about something from you. Like,
of course. It's
that's,
only your own.
That's not really
it's your
me.
own reflection
What I've
reflecting back. Yeah.
has triggered something in you that you're not happy with, so now it's my fault.
Yeah.
And sometimes I look at it and go, okay, maybe I could have worded that a little bit differently, but you can't word something in 200 words that's going to appease everybody. So
Of course. And
I don't read comments anymore anyway.
Mate, you're always, like, I have a thing, I've never seen a statue of a critic. I've only seen statues of people that have actually are out doing things. And as you said as well, the people that are throwing shit at you are the ones that aren't doing it themselves, or they can't do it, or they won't do it. They don't, they're not willing to do the hard work to, like, mate, I cop it all the time with this podcast. Oh, you should do this better. You should do that. Well, if you think you can do a better job,
have at it.
Have at it. Go and do it. But they don't, because they don't want to do the work, and they don't realise the sacrifice. As, mate, I'm sitting in your office and I'm seeing, there's a photo of you from the regiment that's hard work, mate. You didn't just fall in your lap. You had to do the work, and there's a lot of people out there that don't want to do that work. They just, it's easier to be a keyboard warrior than it is to actually, take accountability for their own life. And
and anything you do that's worthwhile, I don't look at it as failure. Like, you're not going to succeed straight away. No one ever succeeds on the first go. Usually it ends in some sort of tragic shit show. And you're like, how did I get myself here?
That's right.
But then you learn, like, okay, sweet. Now next time I do this, I'll go and do this. And it's this constant process of learning. So it's trial and error is how I see it. So anything, and I've got some really ambitious plans ahead of me, and there's going to be a lot of trial and error. And error it potentially could cost me a bit. So there's some work to be done in the preparation space. The only way I would fail is if I didn't show up to the start. For me, quitting that's failure. When you quit just because it got difficult, or there's no really solid reason for not continuing on, or for why you quit, that's failure.
Yeah.
So otherwise, it's just trial and error. And
That's right.
You're going to make a shitload of errors. And you talk to anybody that's in any position anywhere, and they made more errors than they got things right. But essentially, the last time you do it, you get it right. That's it. You move on. You're not going to make any more errors. But up until that point, it is all errors.
That's right. So any young listener out there that hears this podcast and what Dan is, keep persevering. Like, keep going, because you learn so much from failure that, if you succeed the first time, it teaches you nothing. If you fail, you then go, oh, okay, I've got to do another plan.
It's a learning process. Like,
exactly.
I talk to my kids all the time. It's like, okay, first time I did this maths equation, did you get it right? No. That's how everything works. You learn how to do it from there, didn't it? Yeah. Did it take 2-3 times? Well, sometimes. Sweet, that's life.
Yep.
And I was like, my thing is, no matter what, keep moving forward.
That's right. And I'll go, mate. I'm looking at the time, and I know you've got to go, so we'll wrap up. I've got a couple final ones. With the studies that you've done now, and with all the research that you've gathered together, what advice would you give to anyone thinking of going and doing selection with what the knowledge you have now, especially going through and serving in the regiment, but then post what you've gathered from evidence? What advice would you give to them to prepare?
Yeah, I'd say just enjoy once you get there. Like, understand that selection can be really difficult, and get yourself into a space where mentally you can get through it, where you're happy that it's going to cost you a lot, but on the other side is going to be a lot of fulfillment. Like, you're going to do a really unique job. It's going to be a difficult job to sort of understand the realities of what you're getting yourself into. It's a different job now than what it was when I was there. The world is constantly changing. What I was doing is no longer relevant. So it's evolved, and it should do. Like, it must continue to evolve, sort of thing. So as far as what the demands are, I know they're busy. I don't know what their work they're doing is. That's their thing. I'm not involved in it anymore. I just talk to some guys that are still there, and they're away all the time, or away a lot. Sort of thing. So it's going to, like, everything's going to be ups and downs. It's going to be difficult, but it's going to be something that is definitely rewarding if you like that type of thing. But look after yourself. So don't immerse yourself into that environment where you have nothing else. Like, because it is self-indulgent. Like, you're definitely asking other people to sacrifice
or your
on you, anyone that's around you, type of thing. It's a very selfish occupation. But that's why it's a great job for young single people. So, I don't know. Like, it's one of those things, like, even though you get in, you don't have to stay there forever. Like, if you don't like it 2 years down the road, go do something else. And you've got all these really good skills, and there would have been a heap of shit that you learn. So, I don't know. Like, I'm all for encouraging people to find something that makes them afraid and excites them at the same time, because that's the sweet spot for challenge, regardless of what it is. It doesn't have to be anything that I'm interested in. It's whatever they like. Whatever level they're at, find that. Then once you've achieved it, look for the next little hill to climb. And just keep climbing, because people are far more capable than they realise. That's
100%.
One thing that's shown up, is that when we look at individuals, we're excelling more and more in sport, breaking records that we never thought we could. Like, we're below 2 hours on a marathon now, but society in general is moving backwards. So we've never been so poor as a collective, but so good as an individual.
Yeah, I like that. Well, that's a good one to ponder, mate. So I won't.
Steal it,
No, I like that. And mate, I've got two final questions. The joining the army, it set you up to where you are now, and you say at the start of the podcast you could have gone that either way. Looking back now, are you glad you walked the path that you did?
I don't know. I don't know what the other path entailed. I don't know. My big dream was to play professional rugby league. At the time, I just didn't. I wasn't focused enough, type of thing. Like, if I went back and told my young self what it looked like, the chances would have increased. Whether I would have got there or not, I don't know. But then I look at rugby league, and they're not exactly the people that I'd want my kids hanging around.
Of course.
And nothing against them. They get away with a lot.
100%.
I think sport, they're overpaid.
Yep.
They're underregulated. Like,
they're a superstar. They're a hero. They're not.
A lot of them I just don't think are great people. I don't know, if I went into that environment, I would definitely be at the leading edge of not being great as a shit human being. So maybe that pathway wouldn't have been very good for me. So I think so. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what the alternatives are. Everyone always, whether they're regrets or not, you look back and think, I wish I had done that differently or that differently. Everyone has that, but overall, I'm pretty content with the trajectory that I've been on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got, there's two final questions here of, you look back on Afghan now, how it ended up. It ended up as a shit show. We could have learned a lot more from it. I don't know. That's politics. And my understanding is politics always plays its own game. I think the Vietnam guys will talk about how all the patrol commanders got kicked out post-Vietnam. World War II, as far as my understanding, is that after World War II, special operations took a beating. It's just, I don't know the specifics, what it is, but I just get the feeling that special operations are full of really strong-minded people who are really hard to lead. And so people who aren't good leaders, don't want them around. There could be a whole heap of other reasons for it. I kind of felt that's a bit of it. But, I don't know. I think it's been handled poorly. That's a completely different discussion. Yeah, of course.
Work being done in that space. It didn't really affect me. I was on the fringe of it. I've seen the impact it had on a lot of people. I know a lot about what went on in a lot of those allegations and what's come of it since, and the false allegations and all the other stuff. Mixed in there is is some level of truth or what actually happened. I do know a lot that the memories that people are using now are completely compromised. That memory is not coded accurately, so asking people for eyewitnesses accounts that far back under that level of pressure, you're going to get an interpretation. So it's pointless. And hence why it's probably gone nowhere. But I think we could have learned a lot more about the impact of putting people under that level of demands for that amount of time with minimal resources and structures around to support them, and the detriment that had on people and their families. So,
of course,
that's a conversation that people aren't really having. I think it's starting to be raised now a bit more vocally in the public sphere. We could have learnt a lot for the next generation because we don't know what's going to be asked of them.
That's
they might
right.
be asked to do things that we never even thought of, or we never thought was possible. So,
good point you raised there.
We haven't really done any justice for them. We just got rid of all the people with all the experience and the knowledge, and literally left them now to work it out on their own. There's still some good guys back there, so it's not completely hopeless. But we lost a lot of experience.
Well, I know
the unit lost a lot of experience. And like it would be disappointing to see them suffer consequences because this was handled suboptimally.
Well, I mean, I know I speak to numerous guys from the regiment or, you know, from the military, and they often say now with the way you guys have been treated, and they're like, well, would I send my son to join, or would I
wouldn't send my kids to join that shit show.
That's right. That's, you know, like, why would you? Like, you know, like, you look at it now and go, it's not worth it. Like, you know, like, you were asked to go and do a job.
Why would anyone want to join an organisation now that eats the people that do the work for it?
Exactly.
You know, you sacrifice yourself for people that are mostly focused on promotion. Like when you talk about the information they're processing or how they're seeing the world, is everyone's transactionary for their promotion.
Yeah.
And then they just shit on them once it's done. It's like, good on you.
That's
fucking
right.
Great leadership.
Yeah. Well, there's
an example.
no accountability, mate.
And then they're out consulting to big firms. And like, they just destroyed the fucking military. Now they're consulting for you.
Yeah.
No way. We're
No.
good guys, but there's definitely more people in that sphere than you would like to think.
100%.
But
that's another discussion. Anyway.
It could have been done better, that's for sure.
Yeah. And, mate, two final ones. What are your plans going forward into the future with you and your family? And how do people get in contact with you if they want to talk to you about the science and the stuff that you're doing now?
Yep. I don't know what the future holds. Sort of
more adventure stuff that you...
Yes, I'm trying to do an extreme... I'm trying to cross Antarctica, but that's not a direct pathway to crossing Antarctica. So I think that goes via a transverse of Greenland, which excites me even less than Antarctica. But it'll be really cool. So I'm looking at that. Whether that comes off or not, I don't know, because it's a really big logistical ask. We're in the process of trying to look at being able to do a south-north transverse of Greenland, which would be a really unique and cool challenge. 3 months solo ski covering 2,000 kilometres into the Arctic.
Yeah, right.
Just so I can get down to Antarctica and do the same, but with no polar bears. So there's that, but then there's a whole heap of family stuff. So my boys are starting to get really active, and they're at that age now where there's a lot of activity. So I'm trying to get them involved in a huge range of different activities, just for the exposure and like a diverse exposure. So they take priority. So if I don't go to Greenland because of them, then so be it. I can reconcile that, because that's another really selfish ask that I'm putting on my family. And then my wife's got her own ambitions, so again, her ambitions will take precedence over my play sort of thing. Like, I'm playing around here, really. So there's that stuff, and beyond that, I don't know. There's always opportunities that come along that you never anticipate, so I just don't really have hard plans. I've got kind of a glide path, and then if I stray from that, fine. And then as far as contacting me, I'm on Instagram under Dan Cooper PhD, which I play around with a little bit. I only check it randomly, so if someone messages me on that I'm not in contact with, it may take me a couple of days, because those messages are hidden initially quite often. But I do try and respond to everything.
You're on LinkedIn too, aren't you? You do post a lot on LinkedIn.
I'm on LinkedIn. I don't use that a huge amount. I go on there a little bit, again, so you can message me on that. That's just under Daniel Cooper, and I do post on there a little bit. I struggle with social media a little bit, because I think people just get on there and rant about shit that I'm not interested in. I just don't have the time to filter through it. I do like the research and the productive stuff that people post on there. But it's just getting harder and harder to find it. So if someone does
a lot of shit on social media,
if someone does message me on those, I will get back to them. So I'm happy to answer questions or point them in a direction. If they want specifics, it's really difficult because there's so much diversity or so much varied information out there that I've looked at to sort of start to put together on things that, like, quite often we'll go, okay, what's the best resource for this? It's like, well, there's no single best resource. Just
there's multiple sources.
Start looking and do your own journey.
That's right.
Because I'm also aware that I don't want to prime other people for the things that I believe or I've looked at, because what if I'm wrong? I would like, if I'm wrong, I'd be happy for them to then come back and challenge me about something they've seen, because I actually enjoy finding out something I thought to be true to be incorrect. I actually get excited from that, and it makes me laugh.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially if it's everyone else thinks it's true, and then I find out it's incorrect. But that's just a small person coming to me.
That's it. So, no, that's it, mate. So if people do want to reach out, just...
Or if they contact you, I'm happy for you to put them in touch with me.
Not a problem, mate. No, definitely can, mate. And wow, mate, what a story. And we've compressed it down a bit due to time constraints, but that's okay. There's a couple of other things that I wanted to put in, but we just don't have the time. But that's okay. And it wasn't anything. It was just around the human performance, around a certain incident that happened. But that's okay. But we'll leave that alone. And
I think I touched on that a little bit, because that's obviously the Bondi incident.
Yeah, correct.
A little bit around, if you haven't given people the experiences going into events like that to draw from, then they're sorting or sifting information to try and work out what's the most important. So some people are going to over-focus on the threat. Some people are going to see the task information really well. When it's two shooters on a bridge like that are mostly exposed with limited cover, there's not a lot of competing information. Like, it's pretty clear what is going on. How people respond to that is going to be based on the preparation that you've done. So, one of the things that I looked at in my time within the police service was I was involved in doing the active armed offender training with both recruits and in service. It's mostly the stuff I was involved in. I don't know what other states are doing. I can't speak to that. But what I've seen was mostly a watered-down version of military combat clearance, or CQB, that's passed down through your police tactical groups, often down into the lower level. So it focuses a lot on room entry, opening doors, and you're asking 2 people to do a job that's usually done by 6 to 10 people. So do the principles still apply? I don't know. Is there a different way of solving that job within the principles? So rather than teaching tactics, I think people need to work out what the principles are that can be done with 1 person, 2 people, with teams coming together, because deconfliction and fratricide is a really big thing. People often shoot at things that they didn't intend to once they've got more information. I have a feeling that there were shots fired in Bondi that were not at the 2 offenders because of it's really difficult, and it's really easy to misperceive information, and that showed up a huge amount in my research, is that people will respond pre-consciously before they're consciously analysing the information, because the risk of death is so high, the level of threat is so high. So there's no judgment there for anyone that may have done that, and I know operators that have fired before they realised that what they were shooting at probably wasn't it. Thankfully, there's been no fratricide incidents. I know it's really high in warfare, so that's a thing. But yeah, the response, and I'm not going to judge any response I've seen. I've seen all the shit go on in the media. I made a comment talking about, if you actually had no training and you've never been there, then maybe think about you watched it from home and you weren't being shot at the time, because that's going to change the way you see things. Maybe just let the review take its course. There's definitely some learnings. I think that if you're accountable, you do your feedback process properly, you'll understand where your training has left them exposed. I don't even know if New South Wales do active armed offender training.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I
heard rumours that they cut it away, especially in service. Having pistols against long gun is a really big task. It's a really big challenge.
100% it is.
That problem set, looking at it from and this goes back to the special operations, and I know I'm dragging time a little bit again here. Looking at it from my special operations background, that's a really simple problem to solve. It's not complex. That's not even complicated. Is that I have the training and the skills and the weapons I overmatch them. So literally that used to be a pretty common occurrence in Afghanistan for specially trained special operations soldiers. So anyone from that community that's throwing mud might want to remember that we were fighting farmers. These guys aren't much better than farmers. Anyway, but we weren't shooting 2 weeks or 2 weeks of training where we fire, I don't know, 6 to 8 shoots or whatever it is. Anywhere from, I don't even know how many rounds they fire, but I know it's not enough, nowhere near enough.
100%.
On a static range, shooting at paper, literally for a currency. And then coming back once a year and firing half a dozen mags or whatever it is people fire. They're not trained in firearms. They get an exposure to their pistol, and then they get another exposure each year to it, and they're asked to maintain that skill. I do believe the detective is a competition shooter.
Correct, yep.
So 40 metres for a proficient pistol shooter is not difficult. We used to get guys shooting 50 metres at head-size steel targets quite accurately within a couple of days. with more adequate training. I'll premise it with that. So it's not the shot's not difficult, but when you're asking people that have had very little exposure to AAO, they're not proficient in that weapon. They didn't join for that task because most of the ads don't talk about that. The ads talk about petting dogs. They talk about a whole heap of other things that are part of that job.
That's right.
Most of that job is about communication.
Yeah.
So you need people that are really good communication. And now they're asked to do something that they've never really done before, under huge time pressure, huge consequences because people are already dying. Okay, and to be honest, from what I've seen, their response is better than I anticipated it would be for people that have trained to that level. So ultimately, I think they did a pretty good job.
I've spoken to a number of police
and
about it.
And there's going to be errors that they made, but you know what? Who gives a shit? Most of them kept going forward. You know what I mean? And the ones
they're not trained to do that.
No, they're moving forward to somebody who's got huge overmatch. You know, they're not always being shot at, and it's much easier to move when people are distracted shooting at someone else. It was always great when they're shooting at your friends because that lets you move on.
Yeah, that's right.
Not so great for your friends.
Yeah.
They've got no body armor. Like, you compare a soft shield or soft skin car with just a normal glass windshield, somebody who's got a vest on that doesn't even fit them that properly, and the females have got a weapon that's designed for a male with a belt that's designed for a male quite often. Like, all their gear and accoutrements are designed off research from men. We're getting better at making sort of gender-specific accoutrements. Most of their understanding of training is back from research on men, so there's this huge... They're already behind the 8 ball on this stuff. And then you compare it to, like, a police tactical group or a special operations thing. Like you can drive a Bearcat right up to those two dudes, pop the door, and use a long arm while you're covered in helmet, body armor, that sort of thing. Well, that's not hard. So, yeah, they did a good job. Ultimately, they're the ones that are going to be thrown into this thing. The fact that none of them got killed, there's been a few seriously injured, and the risk is and probability is that it's going to happen when you're outmatched like that. And it's always unfortunate. No officers have died as of yet. I don't know how seriously injured they all. I think one of them's out there, but don't know about it. So, yeah, ultimately, I think they did a pretty good job. Under the level of fear that they would have been under in that situation, they've done pretty well.
I agree, mate. I think, you know, these keyboard warriors that are having a crack, and, you know, because I'm exposed to it with interviewing you guys and interviewing police, and I know the capability of what a Glock can, you know, with, as you've just said, with the limited training of, you know, most can shoot 20 metres, some can shoot with old mate who got the 40, you know, with training. Yeah, they did a fantastic job under tried, testing circumstances.
I would challenge that any of them, other than the detective, have ever done a movement approach to a shoot. Like, they probably do very minimal movement. And to be honest, I work with guys in special operations that would probably be still in the footwell of that car that got shot at. Like, I know guys who would not have gone forward. So
that's right.
Yeah.
So they've done well.
So people need to be realistic in their expectations.
Exactly. No, mate, I just wanted to grab your your thoughts around that, and I'm going to wrap it up right now. And Dan, you have served your country with honour, mate, and it's just been, you've proven to succeed at the elite level, and you've, you know, through grit, determination, and just never giving up. And, mate, I just want to thank you for your time and for coming on True Blue and sharing your story, mate. So thank you, mate, and thanks for what you've done. Thanks for your service.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, and it was a pleasure. I hope there's some value in there for the people that listen to it.
Nah, definitely. Yeah. Nah, thanks, mate. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Cheers, mate.
You're welcome.
Thanks for listening to True Blue Conversations with your host, Adam Bloom. Real talk with those that pledge to keep us safe with grit, sacrifice, and determination. See you next time.